At 13, modern-born Zhu Ying is framed and sent to die on Ming's northern frontier. His knowledge of history predicts war, while every kill grants 20 permanent stat points. Soon, he saves Commander Lula and turns his death sentence into a 1,000-man army. His household lacked military registration, making legal enlistment completely impossible. Someone powerful solved that obstacle by forging documents and changing his age. That helpful criminal was connected directly to the wealthy and ruthless Shen family. They raised 13-year-old Zhu Ying to 16 with several strokes of ink. Then they shipped him toward Danning, where recruits commonly returned as corpses. He looked more suited for poetry examinations than bloody frontier warfare. Unfortunately, the bandits ahead had little respect for scholarly facial features. The 100-man commander ordered veterans forward while nervous recruits guarded the rear. Old Zhang noticed Zhu Ying's shaking hands and offered wonderfully simple advice. He told the boy to aim carefully, release quickly, and collect military merit. Zhu Ying claimed he felt calm, while his fingers argued very convincingly otherwise. The soldiers pushed deeper until crude fences appeared between the ancient trees. A complete bandit village waited there, protected by barricades and sharpened wooden stakes. The hidden raiders spotted Imperial armor and immediately screamed for everyone to attack. Arrows burst from the darkness before the Ming soldiers could secure formation. Several recruits dropped, clutching pierced arms, legs, and suddenly shortened futures. Zhu Ying silently promised to haunt every Shen household if he died. The commander roared for archers, finally giving the frightened boy something familiar. 30 bowmen stepped forward, drew together, and released a dark rising cloud. Their volley crashed over the barricades and scattered the enemy archers. Spearmen charged immediately, using disciplined reach against poorly armored swordsmen. Long weapons, solid armor, and organized ranks turned the clash brutally unequal. Zhu Ying stayed behind the line, searching for one target he could handle. A raider lifted his blade, exposing the narrow gap beneath his chin. Zhu Ying pulled until the bowstring trembled beside his cheek, then released. The arrow crossed the clearing and buried itself through the man's throat. The raider collapsed, kicked twice, and became Zhu Ying's first battlefield memory. That was when a cold voice echoed inside Zhu Ying's mind. Killing one Tartar had granted him 20 points of physical strength. For several breaths, Zhu Ying wondered whether terror had finally broken his sanity. Then his arms changed, growing warmer, steadier, and unmistakably more powerful. He had lived 6 years after transmigrating into this dangerous historical world. During those years, no heavenly mentor, system, treasure, or miracle had appeared. His special power activated while several enemies were already shooting at him. The timing was terrible, but the benefit looked absolutely magnificent. Every enemy killed could produce attributes that permanently strengthened his body. The military punishment designed to destroy him suddenly resembled unlimited training grounds. Zhu Ying almost felt grateful toward the family that had arranged his death. He knocked another arrow and discovered the stronger bow now felt strangely light. His second shot punched through another raider before the man could duck. Another notification delivered 20 strength points, confirming this was no hallucination. These enemies also sounded foreign, despite dressing like ordinary mountain bandits. Danning bordered Jurchen territory, and trained raiders often disguised themselves as locals. Zhu Ying was not farming helpless villagers, but hostile foreign infiltrators. That small moral distinction made the next arrows considerably easier to release. But then, the bandit leader carved through Ming soldiers with frightening skill. His heavy saber split shields, armor, and confidence with equal enthusiasm. Commander Lula met him directly, but lost ground after several exchanges. One brutal kick sent Lula rolling across mud and broken arrows. The raider raised his blade, preparing to finish the fallen officer. Zhu Ying saw an excellent target and an even better career opportunity. His first arrow struck the leader's chest, forcing him backward without stopping him. The wounded giant kept charging, apparently treating arrows as inconvenient jewelry. Zhu Ying released again, placing the second shaft directly through his heart. The leader stumbled, dropped his weapon, and crashed beside the commander. Zhu Ying still remembered every villain who pretended death before attacking again. He rushed forward, drew his saber, and removed the leader's head. Blood covered his face before the system announced several generous rewards. He had killed a Tartar centurion and gained 20 points in every attribute. The first officer kill also produced one normal treasure chest. This sounded wonderful until his stomach noticed the severed head nearby. Zhu Ying turned green and fought desperately against an embarrassing battlefield reaction. Lula watched his young rescuer struggling and laughed like an experienced veteran. The commander called it normal rookie behavior, which helped absolutely nobody. Once fighting ended, officers counted 48 enemies, 4 dead soldiers, and 12 wounded. Lula approached personally and asked the name of the archer who saved him. Zhu Ying reported less than 2 months of military service. That explained the pale face, but certainly not those 2 perfect arrows. Lula promised support whenever Zhu Ying needed help inside the army. A commander owing his life was better protection than any forged document. Then Lula ruined the touching moment by assigning corpse cleaning duty. Zhu Ying obeyed happily because the battlefield still contained unclaimed system rewards. He summoned the hidden panel and finally examined his altered body. The display listed his real age as 13, exposing another forged detail. Strength had climbed far beyond his original level, while other attributes also increased. Speed, constitution, endurance, spirit, lifespan, and storage appeared in neat rows. The storage space measured 1 cubic meter, small, but wonderfully invisible. The panel also listed an expected lifespan of 88 years. Zhu Ying immediately wondered whether fallen enemies could also drop additional life. His hand brushed the first corpse, triggering 5 constitution points. The next body granted 5 full days of lifespan instead. That discovery was greater than silver, promotion, or any ordinary military reward. Chinese emperors spent fortunes swallowing suspicious medicines while searching for immortality. Zhu Ying merely needed battlefields and permission to touch the dead. He moved from corpse to corpse with increasingly cheerful determination. Strength appeared, then speed, endurance, spirit, and several more days of life. Veterans watched the rookie zigzag across the camp, touching every fallen enemy. They assumed he was checking carefully for raiders pretending to be dead. That explanation made him appear brave, cautious, and slightly unhinged. Zhu Ying accepted all 3 descriptions while continuing his private harvest. Afterward, soldiers buried the bodies together inside one enormous pit. That was when a squad leader discovered something far more attractive than corpses. Behind the village stood a room packed with copper, silver, jewelry, and gold. The supposed bandits had collected enough treasure to resemble frontier bankers. Lula immediately suspected organized foreign raiders rather than desperate local criminals. Zhu Ying supported that conclusion, describing their accents, training, and disciplined movements. The commander ordered everything transported to the county for official investigation. Every soldier stared at the wealth while remembering the emperor's corruption laws. Stealing military loot could cost 1 head, several relatives, and future family branches. Nobody dared touch anything, except the boy carrying invisible storage space. Zhu Ying crouched beside one chest and pretended to test its weight. While veterans laughed, 100 taels of silver vanished into his system. That amount could support an ordinary household comfortably for many years. He stopped there, wisely deciding that greedy miracles often ended badly. The unit marched 10 miles toward the county with captured treasure and prisoners. Zhu Ying walked among them, carrying an invisible fortune and several dangerous secrets. What Zhu Ying did not know was the Shen family believed their plan had worked. Shen Wanzhen sat inside his luxurious hall, surrounded by ambitious sons. The eldest reported that Zhu Ying had been registered in Daning's military. A frontier soldier could not leave freely without long service or serious disability. Between Mongols, Jurkins, raiders, and disease, surviving 30 years seemed deeply unlikely. Shen Wanzhen called the sacrifice necessary, though necessity meant protecting accumulated power. An old agreement had promised Zhu Ying to Shen Wanzhen's 4th granddaughter. Then Liu Hao appeared, offering a marriage tied directly to palace influence. A merchant dynasty survived by attaching itself to power before power demanded loyalty. Yet openly breaking his grandmother's agreement could stain the family's reputation for honoring debts. Zhu Ying's continued existence threatened both the new marriage and their carefully polished legend. Forged military papers solved both problems while keeping the family's hands publicly clean. One son still feared the boy might survive and return with questions. He requested money for a permanent solution before those questions reached powerful ears. Shen Wanzhen approved, choosing political fear over gratitude to the family that saved him. Their definition of caution included making someone dead, then making him extra dead. Before plans advanced, a young woman stormed furiously into the hall. She was Shen Yi, another daughter born to a concubine. Unlike the intended bride, Shen Yi possessed courage and a functioning conscience. She demanded to know why Zhu Ying had been sent towards certain death. The patriarch reminded her that a concubine's daughter held little family authority. He dismissed her concern without granting even the courtesy of an explanation. Shen Yi left furious, frightened, and completely unable to protect him. The woman promised to Zhu Ying stayed silent, while the uninvolved sister fought publicly. Fate placed decency in the family member with the least political power. But while the Shen family celebrated imperial decisions created greater opportunities for Zhu Ying. In Nanjing, Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang studied reports from the troubled northern frontier. The founding emperor had risen from starving orphan to ruler of China. He also frightened officials so thoroughly that breathing required careful permission. Crown Prince Zhu Biao entered directly, the only person welcomed without announcement. The prince reported more than 100 coordinated bandit incidents around Danning. Ordinary thieves did not organize attacks, supplies, and escape routes so effectively. Both father and son suspected northern Yuan influence behind the frontier disorder. Jurchen tribes could raid Ming lands while weakening routes for future campaigns. Zhu Yuanzhang had already ordered General Feng Shen to assemble a massive army. The emperor planned to destroy Nagachu before northern forces grew stronger. He placed military supply arrangements directly under Crown Prince Zhu Biao. Then he ordered Danning's commanders to eliminate every bandit before the campaign. Failure would be answered through the emperor's favorite administrative instrument, execution. The conversation shifted when Zhu Yuanzhang noticed his son looked exhausted. For one quiet moment, China's most terrifying ruler became a worried father. He had already lost beloved family and refused to lose Zhu Biao. The crown prince promised to rest while continuing to carry imperial burdens. That order traveled downward from throne, generals, prefects, and garrison commanders. For Zhu Ying, it meant more raids, corpses, attributes, and accidental career advancement. Back at the garrison, nearly 1,000 soldiers assembled across the parade ground. Commander Wei Quan announced successful suppression around the county. More than 200 raiders had been killed across several operations. The first 100-man company earned special recognition for treasure and 48 confirmed kills. Names were called for rewards, beginning with Lula and then Zhu Ying. The boy stepped forward while pretending his heartbeat remained completely respectable. Ming military promotion now relied heavily on recorded battlefield merit. 5 kills could create a small banner leader commanding 10 soldiers. 10 kills could lead toward higher banner authority over 50 troops. Major achievements could lift ordinary soldiers several ranks in one campaign. Lula received silver and an official merit entry for leadership. Zhu Ying received 50 taels and promotion to small banner leader. Only 2 months earlier, he had been an illegally enlisted expendable recruit. Now 10 soldiers, an officer's salary, and formal authority belonged to him. The Shen family tried burying him, but planted something rapidly growing instead. As the ceremony ended, his system delivered another normal treasure chest. His first formal appointment also generated a mysterious authority seal. That seal strengthened every soldier serving directly under his command. Combat power, morale, and endurance each increased by 10%. Zhu Ying had become a walking military enhancement without explaining anything. His new soldiers stared nervously when he entered their assigned barracks. 2 days earlier, he had slept beside them as an ordinary recruit. He told them to relax, rest, and prepare for more frontier fighting. They scattered quickly, showing excellent obedience and reasonable survival instincts. Alone at last, Zhu Ying opened the hidden panel above his bed. Every major physical attribute now exceeded an ordinary adult's natural limits. Crossing 100 points in all categories produced another treasure chest. 3 unopened chests waited, turning his exhausted grin into something alarming. The first contained a yellow-grade cultivation method called Iron Body Technique. 1 day of training could add strength, constitution, and endurance together. Even reduced gains would eventually push his body beyond every normal warrior. The second chest produced a finely crafted steel saber. The third granted complete mastery of horsemanship without requiring previous experience. Knowledge flooded his mind, transforming ignorance into veteran-level instinct within seconds. Zhu Ying lay smiling, viewing an increasingly absurd list of advantages. The family wanted one powerless orphan removed from their marriage calculations. Instead, they created an officer with supernatural growth and excellent reasons for revenge. Rather than memorize labels, Zhu Ying compared each attribute with what battle had changed. 100 marked an ordinary adult baseline, and he had already crossed it. Strength made his military bow feel lighter than a child's practice toy. Speed turned hurried movements around the barracks into slow, readable decisions. Constitution had already sealed wounds that should have bled through the night. Endurance left his breathing calm despite battle, cleanup, and hours without rest. Spirit preserved details of the battlefield with unsettling clarity instead of panic. Lifespan quietly promised what emperors had poisoned themselves trying to obtain. Storage hid silver and weapons inside weightless space that no inspection could find. That hidden meter of emptiness was already protecting silver and system weapons. Treasure chests appeared after officer kills, promotions, and important attribute milestones. The system therefore rewarded both personal violence and recognized military progress. Zhu Ying suspected higher achievements would eventually produce better chest grades. For now, even normal chests contained advantages unavailable anywhere else. Iron body technique entered his memory as movement, breathing, posture, and circulation. He understood each training sequence without reading a scroll or meeting a master. The technique stressed muscles carefully, then rebuilt them stronger through mysterious energy. One complete day promised 10 strength, 10 constitution, and 10 endurance. Even half-speed nighttime practice could produce terrifying yearly accumulation. Zhu Ying calculated several thousand points before his next birthday. That estimate ignored battle drops, corpse harvests, promotions, and future cultivation methods. The arithmetic became so absurd that revenge suddenly felt almost modest. Within years, city gates might become inconvenient pieces of firewood. Armies could eventually resemble crowds waiting for one very determined fighter. He also considered the endurance statistic with the teenager's briefly inappropriate imagination. Then he wisely returned his attention toward war, survival, and revenge. The fine steel saber felt perfectly balanced inside his system storage. Its edge surpassed standard military iron issued to ordinary frontier recruits. Drawing it publicly would raise questions about origin, purchase, and ownership. Zhu Ying needed confusion, darkness, or battle before revealing the weapon. Horsemanship mastery arrived differently from the cultivation method. Instead of instructions, complete experience flooded his nerves and instincts. He understood mounting, balance, speed control, archery, pursuit, and mounted combat. Every shift of weight and pressure from the knees suddenly made sense. He could read a horse's tension from breathing, ears, and shoulder movement. The only missing element was public evidence that he had practiced before. Fortunately, military officers rarely asked talented riders for childhood certificates. The authority seal remained even more valuable than any personal skill. Small Banner Command linked 10 soldiers directly to Zhu Ying's invisible influence. Those men received 10% improvements without feeling supernatural interference. They would simply experience steadier hands, stronger courage, and slower exhaustion. Such enhancement could prevent mistakes that killed recruits during their first battle. Zhu Ying realized leadership now carried measurable magical value. Every promotion might increase the number affected or deepen the enhancement. The system wanted him climbing command ranks rather than fighting forever alone. That design matched his need for legal power against the Shen family. A rich merchant house could silence civilians, servants, and impoverished relatives. Silencing a decorated military commander would be considerably more complicated. Silencing someone favored by imperial generals could become fatal political stupidity. Zhu Ying intended to reach that level before returning to Beiping. He did not merely want Shen Wanzhen frightened inside a locked mansion. He wanted official documents exposing forged enlistment, conspiracy, and attempted murder. He wanted every son involved forced to answer before authorities they could not bribe. He wanted the family to understand they had created their own destroyer. The engagement itself had never inspired romantic devotion inside Zhu Ying. It existed because his grandmother once saved Shen Wanzhen's entire household. Without her help, the future merchant legend might have died in poverty. The marriage promise supposedly repaid that enormous life-saving debt. When better connections appeared, gratitude became an inconvenient accounting entry. Lu Hao offered access to the crown prince's domestic political circle. His sister held influence near Zhu Biao and raised an important child. From a merchant perspective, the new marriage promised prestige beyond silver. Shen Wanzhen chose ambition, which Zhu Ying could understand intellectually. What he could never forgive was the method used to remove him. A cancelled engagement caused insult, gossip, and temporary anger. Forged military papers sent a 13-year-old toward decades of deadly service. The Shen family did not avoid embarrassment. They attempted calculated murder. Then they considered assassins because frontier danger still seemed insufficient. That transformed a broken agreement into an unforgivable blood debt. Shen Yu's protest complicated Zhu Ying's hatred slightly. She had risked punishment despite receiving no benefit from defending him. As a concubine's daughter, her position inside the mansion remained fragile. She could not overrule patriarch, sons, marriage negotiations, or household guards. Still, she spoke when silence would have been safer. Zhu Ying remembered that distinction whenever anger generalized the entire family. One decent person did not cleanse the household, but deserved separate judgment. The promised bride welcomed Lu Hao's wealth and political connections. Zhu Ying felt no heartbreak over someone happy to replace him. His anger belonged to betrayal, attempted murder, and stolen choice. The system gave him time to answer those offenses carefully. Lifespan drops meant patience no longer cost as much as ordinary lives. Each battlefield could extend his future while shortening an enemy's. That relationship was dark, efficient, and difficult to discuss over dinner. Zhu Ying also reviewed the stolen 100 taels with practical satisfaction. The invisible storage protected silver from theft, fire, rain, and inspection. He could fund travel information, equipment, or loyal retainers independently. Official rewards now added legal wealth that required no secret explanation. 50 taels from promotion already made him richer than most soldiers. Future rank would bring salaries, land consideration, gifts, and political access. The system's military path offered money and protection together, yet wealth meant little if he died before learning to use it. Training therefore became his immediate and uncompromising routine. He dismissed his 10 soldiers early, allowing bodies and nerves to recover. Then he waited until the barracks settled into heavy breathing. Beneath blankets, Zhu Ying followed Iron Body's first controlled sequence. He tightened muscles in precise order while maintaining slow, patterned breaths. Heat gathered below the stomach and spread through limbs. Every circulation felt like invisible hammers shaping bones from within. Pain arrived gradually, but his improving constitution kept it manageable. Sweat-soaked clothing despite the cold frontier night. Hours passed while other recruits slept, snored, and occasionally complained in dreams. Before dawn, the system confirmed 10 points across 3 categories. Zhu Ying nearly laughed loudly enough to wake the entire barracks. The technique worked exactly as described, without rare herbs or expensive teachers. Most martial artists guessed at progress for years without receiving a single number. His panel confirmed the result before dawn, making disciplined training dangerously addictive. Yet the real danger was how every advantage strengthened the next one. Cultivation improved combat, while combat supplied attributes that accelerated cultivation. Greater strength drove arrows deeper and turned more enemies into further strength. Higher constitution allowed harsher training without surrendering his body to injury. Endurance kept him fighting after ordinary soldiers reached exhaustion and fatal mistakes. The system had built a staircase upward, and every step was stained with blood. Zhu Ying practiced quietly each night while handling command duties by day. He learned every soldier's name, origin, weapon preference, and obvious weakness. Some were farmers pulled from hereditary military households. Others grew up around forts and understood frontier danger too well. 2 had lost relatives during earlier raids and carried reckless anger. 1 panicked whenever arrows whistled closely after seeing his brother die. Zhu Ying adjusted positions so courage and experience balanced across the unit. The authority seal helped, but organization prevented avoidable losses. He checked bowstrings, spearheads, armor TIs, and damaged footwear personally. Soldiers found this unusual from an officer promoted through spectacular killing. They expected arrogance and received careful equipment inspections. Instead, respect began replacing fear inside the 10-man command. Zhu Ying also practiced indirect leadership through Lula's earlier example. The commander knew when to joke, threaten, encourage, and remain silent. Saving Lula created patronage, but observation created education. Military rank meant controlling people whose mistakes could kill everyone nearby. A strong officer who ignored logistics became a well-dressed corpse. Zhu Ying stored that lesson beside his combat techniques. Meanwhile, recovered treasure and evidence traveled through higher command. Officials confirmed jerkin marks, foreign accents, and organized raiding patterns. The bandit village belonged to a larger frontier destabilization effort. Captured routes suggested multiple cells operating around Danning. Their purpose included theft, civilian terror, and disruption of Ming supplies. That information climbed toward prefectural offices. Already expecting imperial pressure, Buan received Zhu Biao's order demanding complete suppression. He summoned generals, clerks, scouts, and local garrison commanders immediately. Reports from several counties described similar weapons and trained raiders. The pattern made accidental bandit growth completely impossible to believe. Jurchen factions were probing defenses while northern Yuan forces watched. General Chun Hung argued that raids would continue until Ming troops struck outward. Defending every village individually surrendered initiative and exhausted local soldiers. Lu Jun agreed that a sharp offensive could break confidence quickly. The Jurchen tribes remained divided, despite shared hostility toward Ming. 20,000 troops could punish the responsible group before others united. Buan worried about casualties, supply, and imperial expectations. Then he remembered Zhu Yuanzhang's instructions concerning failed commanders. The possibility of execution clarified strategic courage remarkably well. He approved the campaign and ordered frontier garrisons toward assembly points. Messengers rode through darkness carrying seals, schedules, and mobilization commands. At Zhu Ying's camp, ordinary routines continued before those orders arrived. He practiced horsemanship mentally, using every movement stored inside memory. During daylight, he watched cavalry drills beyond the infantry grounds. Veteran riders controlled mounts through tiny shifts, invisible to untrained observers. Zhu Ying understood each signal despite never sitting in their saddles. He identified poor balance, loose reins, and delayed reactions immediately. Still, he avoided commenting because impossible knowledge attracted attention. The graded saber also remained hidden while he trained with issued steel. His growing strength made ordinary practice weapons feel increasingly fragile. He learned to restrain force, so sparring partners kept functioning limbs. That control mattered as much as maximum power. A warrior unable to limit strength would expose secrets during every handshake. After 6 nights, attribute gains became visible even beneath loose clothing. Shoulders broadened slightly while posture grew more stable. His steps carried balance uncommon for a thin teenage recruit. Old soldiers noticed, but blamed regular food and military exercise. Nobody imagined invisible numbers changing his body after every midnight session. Zhu Ying's 10th soldier finally asked why their young commander never seemed tired. He answered that revenge provided excellent motivation and terrible sleeping habits. The men laughed, assuming it was another officer's dark joke. Zhu Ying gladly allowed them to keep that comfortable misunderstanding. By the 6th morning, weapons inspection had become another disciplined routine. Yet unusual messenger traffic hinted that routine would not last much longer. His soldiers noticed mounted couriers crossing the camp before sunrise. Zhu Ying recognized the signs of larger orders moving down the chain. Imperial decisions were finally reaching their small corner of Danning. The next campaign might involve thousands of enemies rather than dozens. More enemies meant greater danger, wider responsibility, and extraordinary system growth. He tightened formation drills and ordered every weapon checked twice. Somewhere beyond the frontier, his first true war was already approaching. Old Zhang occasionally visited, bringing practical advice and questionable dried meat. He warned Zhu Ying that promotions created envy beside opportunity. Older officers might resent a child receiving authority through one dramatic battle. Zhu Ying should remain respectful while keeping every achievement properly recorded. Military clerks, witnesses, and sealed reports protected merit from quiet theft. That advice matched Zhu Ying's growing understanding of institutional power. Strength could defeat attackers, but paperwork could preserve the victory afterward. He began memorizing merit procedures, supply rules, and chains of command. Every regulation became either protection, weapon, or future obstacle. His modern memories made structured administration easier to understand quickly. He also recognized corruption remained dangerous despite the emperor's brutal punishments. Fear reduced theft, but ambitious people always searched for safer methods. Zhu Ying therefore separated secret wealth from officially recorded rewards. The hidden silver would never appear during inspections or salary calculations. His legal income remained modest enough to avoid immediate suspicion. This double foundation gave him flexibility without sacrificing public credibility. By the campaign's beginning, Zhu Ying no longer resembled disposable frontier meat. He had become trained officer, system user, and patient future avenger. Now, the battlefield would decide how quickly all three identities expanded. 6 disciplined nights of iron body training passed beneath the sleeping barracks. Each session added strength, constitution, and endurance, without attracting public attention. By the 6th dawn, Zhu Ying's youthful frame carried unmistakably greater power. He could feel new force humming quietly through muscles and strengthened bones. That morning, heavy war drums suddenly rolled across the entire garrison. The emergency rhythm sent resting soldiers scrambling toward armor, bows, and spears. Zhu Ying called his 10 subordinates awake before panic could organize them. They dressed hurriedly, knocking helmets together and tangling several important straps. He corrected equipment, checked weapons, and pushed everyone toward the parade ground. Most expected another bandit hunt, and looked appropriately unhappy about it. Zhu Ying reminded them fear could not cancel military orders or sharpen weapons. Bandits had 1 head and 2 legs, while Ming soldiers possessed armor. The argument was questionable, but it steadied several frightened young recruits. His authority seal quietly strengthened morale as the unit crossed the camp. Other companies poured from barracks, creating disciplined chaos beneath the drums. Officers shouted positions, while flag bearers hurried toward assigned formation markers. Zhu Ying placed veterans beside weaker recruits before the final ranks closed. His 10 soldiers stood straighter when they realized their commander looked excited. Officers called final numbers while flag bearers planted markers in the frozen mud. The entire garrison assembled beneath Wei Quan's grim face. He announced the true source behind Daning's coordinated bandit attacks. Jurchen tribes had sent trained fighters disguised as ordinary local raiders. Command had therefore ordered a full campaign beyond the northern border. This would not be another forest raid against hungry criminals. They were marching toward organized enemies with cavalry, commanders, and real military discipline. Silence swallowed the parade ground as recruits imagined everything going wrong. Zhu Ying imagined thousands of enemies dropping thousands of permanent attribute points. His excitement was not entirely selfish, because he remembered future history. Descendants of these frontier tribes would someday conquer China and destroy Ming rule. That knowledge gave his system farming a surprisingly patriotic flavor. 2 days later, the garrison reached a massive frontier encampment. 20,000 Ming soldiers waited in disciplined rows beneath countless banners. General Chen Heng and General Lu Jun commanded the combined operation. Their orders demanded a painful lesson, not negotiation or ceremonial warning. The army would strike quickly before Jurchen forces gathered reinforcements. Senior commanders argued eagerly over who should lead the dangerous vanguard. Military merit attracted ambitious officers almost as effectively as gold. General Chen Heng selected 2 divisions for the frontal advance. Other formations would split, circle wide, and close around retreating enemies. The plan promised blood, promotion, and several opportunities for battlefield confusion. Inside his assigned camp, Zhu Ying prepared in a strangely commercial manner. He carved his name onto every arrow collected from the supply carts. Military clerks counted arrow kills by reading names from recovered shafts. Unmarked arrows created dead enemies, but very disappointing promotion records. A normal quiver held 50, so Zhu Ying carried more than 1. His soldiers asked why anyone needed over 100 arrows. He answered vaguely, because explaining stat farming seemed professionally unwise. Every marked shaft represented merit, power, and another system notification. He also reviewed future events that might overturn the entire empire. After Zhu Yuanzhang, succession struggles would eventually ignite the Jingnan rebellion. For the present, survival remained more urgent than designing future kingdoms. Lula approached after sunset and inspected the overloaded young archer. He warned that their company would march in the first wave. The vanguard meant receiving enemy arrows before everyone else joined. Zhu Ying appreciated the danger and the convenient access to targets. Lula then questioned the suspicious details inside his military records. Why would someone from Beiping enlist voluntarily inside distant, dangerous Danning? Zhu Ying admitted that influential enemies had forged everything and sent him. The commander understood immediately that this involved more than a private grudge. He lacked enough rank to challenge wealthy conspirators outside the army. Still, Lula promised protection while Zhu Ying served beneath his banner. The boy accepted that loyalty seriously, hiding his usual sarcastic response. At dawn, 20,000 Ming soldiers crossed into disputed frontier territory. No marked border stood there because Zhu Yuanzhang considered all nearby land reclaimable. Scout cavalry rode ahead, checking valleys, hills, and open grassland for ambushes. Infantry followed in layered columns while archers guarded vulnerable approaches. What the Ming soldiers did not know was Jian Guda had prepared their welcome. He had warned tribal leaders against provoking the increasingly powerful Ming dynasty. Those leaders remembered old Mongol hierarchies and dismissed Han soldiers as inferior. Jian Guda remembered that those supposedly inferior soldiers had expelled the Mongols. Unfortunately, wisdom arrived too late, and nobody refunded strategic stupidity. He ordered civilians northward while nearly 15,000 fighters gathered nearby. 8,000 cavalry divided into concealed wings beyond the settlement. Infantry remained behind, ready to hold long enough for families to escape. Jian Guda sought delay, but victory would make him famous among 3 tribes. He expected Ming officers to charge directly into the prepared trap. The Ming vanguard advanced carefully, each soldier separated by measured distance. Zhu Ying marched in the 3rd row with an arrow already nocked. His heart pounded more from anticipation than fear, which seemed medically questionable. Somewhere ahead waited thousands of enemies and potential system rewards. Suddenly, war cries rolled downward as mounted warriors appeared across the hills. Hundreds became thousands, pouring forward like a leather-armored black tide. Jurchen riders carried sabers, spears, and compact bows designed for horseback. They released arrows without slowing, displaying skills learned since childhood. General Chun Hung remained calm and ordered archers toward the front. Cavalry and spearmen held behind them in a layered defensive formation. 2,000 bowmen sprinted forward and raised weapons toward the sky. The charging riders closed from 100 paces, 80, then 60. Chun Hung finally dropped his raised hand and ordered the first volley. 2,000 arrows climbed together, briefly darkening the morning above them. The shafts descended upon horses, riders, armor, and suddenly ruined confidence. Men tumbled from saddles while wounded horses crashed into following ranks. Zhu Ying's first marked arrow entered one rider's chest. The system granted 20 strength points before the corpse touched the ground. His next shot delivered 20 constitution, followed immediately by another target. Increasing strength made each draw faster, smoother, and more violently powerful. Arrows began leaving his bow with the force of small siege bolts. Every notification encouraged another shot before the previous victim fully collapsed. He stopped thinking about fear and became a precise harvesting machine. Then the Jurchen volley arrived, tearing through the Ming archer formation. One soldier fell with an arrow through his throat. Another screamed around a shaft buried deeply inside his shoulder. 2 men from Zhu Ying's own small unit collapsed beside him. The battlefield instantly stopped, resembling a convenient game with visible rewards. These were trained killers, and his companions were disappearing between breaths. Zhu Ying could not shield everyone, but faster shooting reduced incoming arrows. He drew, released, shifted targets, and repeated without wasting movement. Strength appeared, then speed, spirit, constitution, and 30 additional lifespan days. His 20th confirmed enemy triggered another normal treasure chest. He stored that information mentally because opening gifts during volleys seemed rude. The cavalry had now closed too far for safe long-range exchanges. General Chun Hung ordered Ming cavalry forward and spearmen directly behind. 5,000 mounted soldiers exploded into motion beneath raised sabers. 3,000 spearmen advanced, bracing for riders, breaking through the collision. Both cavalry waves struck with a sound like collapsing wooden buildings. Horses screamed, metal rang, and men vanished beneath trampling hooves. Sabers opened armor while long spears punched riders backward from saddles. Zhu Ying remained among archers, selecting enemies circling the tangled melee. His targets moved unpredictably, but his improving eyes tracked every opening. Arrow followed arrow until every attribute crossed 200 points. The system rewarded another chest as warm energy washed through his body. Muscles, senses, breathing, and balance sharpened together in one overwhelming wave. He now possessed roughly twice the physical ability of a powerful adult. Drawing the bow became effortless, while moving riders appeared strangely slower. His hands blurred through knocking, drawing, aiming, and releasing. But then, Jian Guda unleashed the hidden cavalry waiting on both flanks. Their outer wings raced beyond the melee, aiming directly for the exposed Ming rear. The commander entered personally, carrying his saber beneath a prominent battle flag. Organized formations dissolved as enemies attacked from front, sides, and rear. The first flank strike hit Ming archers before officers could realign them. Mounted, Jerkin swept sideways, releasing arrows into exposed backs and shoulders. Another wing circled wider, searching for gaps around the spearmen. Chun Hung sent reserve cavalry outward to meet both movements. Dust rose so thick that banners became shadows rather than instructions. Zhu Ying listened for drums, but hoofbeats swallowed every signal. His young soldiers instinctively closed around the small banner marker. The authority seal steadied them when nearby recruits began running. One frightened archer turned south and collided with a charging horse. Another dropped his bow, then froze because no safe direction remained. Zhu Ying shouted for everyone nearby to face outward and maintain spacing. His voice carried farther than expected through rising spirit and constitution. Several unassigned recruits obeyed despite lacking formal connection to his unit. A rough circle formed, with archers shooting through every visible opening. Zhu Ying chose riders already committed to straight attack paths. Predictable movement made them easier targets despite the dust. His arrow struck one horseman beneath the raised arm. The next shaft entered a rider leaning forward over his saddle. A third passed through leather and buried inside the man's ribs. System messages continued, but Zhu Ying stopped consciously counting them. The bowstring moved so quickly that individual releases blended together. His fingers should have torn, yet constitution repaired damage almost immediately. Shoulders should have weakened, yet endurance rose faster than fatigue accumulated. The battle's usual downward spiral worked backward inside his body. Every minute made Zhu Ying more dangerous than the minute before. Jerkin riders noticed the unusually lethal archer and began avoiding his front. That movement redirected several enemies toward weaker nearby formations. Zhu Ying shifted position to keep their attention and reduce friendly losses. He fired at helmets, throats, armpits, and exposed sides beneath, turning bodies. One arrow struck a rider attempting to draw at Lula. The commander saw the rescue, recognized Zhu Ying, and shouted approval. Then cavalry separated them again behind a wall of horses. The surviving members of Zhu Ying's original 10 fought with growing discipline. One held spare arrows while another watched the officer's blind side. A third dragged a wounded companion behind fallen shields. The seal's morale effect did not erase fear. It made fear manageable. They still trembled, shouted, and ducked incoming shafts. Even while trembling, they kept performing useful actions instead of collapsing. Zhu Ying understood why commanders valued trained formations above individual courage. 10 frightened men cooperating could survive what 10 heroes attempted separately. A Jerkin horse broke through and knocked 2 archers aside. Zhu Ying released at nearly point-blank range into the rider's face. The body fell backward, while the horse continued riderless through dust. He caught the animal's reins briefly and turned it away from wounded soldiers. Horsemanship mastery guided the motion despite remaining on foot. Anyone watching closely might have questioned that effortless control. Fortunately, everyone nearby was busy avoiding sharp objects. The broad Ming cavalry countercharge met the flanking riders with brutal impact. War horses crashed shoulder to shoulder, sometimes throwing both mounted soldiers. Spears entered gaps between shields while sabers struck downward from saddles. Some riders fell and continued fighting from the ground. Others disappeared beneath hooves before raising weapons again. Zhu Ying saw no elegant duels or theatrical pauses. Combat was pressure, confusion, panic, and tiny openings measured in heartbeats. His modern memories offered little preparation for the sound of crushed bodies. The system's rewards could not make screams less real. One recruit called for his mother while holding a torn abdomen. A veteran nearby ended an enemy, then died from an unseen arrow. Zhu Ying felt nausea rising, but forced his eyes toward active threats. Survival required attention, while grief would need to wait. He fired at the archer responsible and received 20 spirit points. The notification felt coldly inappropriate, yet immediately useful. Higher spirit sharpened his concentration against horror and distraction. It did not remove emotion. It prevented emotion from controlling movement. Zhu Ying began recognizing how every attribute supported more than simple power. Strength, controlled draw force, weapon impact, and raw physical pressure. Speed governed reactions, release timing, and rapid target changes. Constitution preserved his body beneath repeated strain and dangerous injuries. Endurance maintained peak output across the steadily lengthening battlefield engagement. Spirit kept judgment clear, while blood covered everything familiar. Together, they turned him into a complete battlefield organism. The Jerkin commander had expected flank pressure to shatter Ming morale. Instead, Disciplined Ming reserves prevented the threatened immediate collapse. Jian Guda therefore drove personally toward the central fighting. His battle flag moved behind him, visible above shifting dust. Drummers changed rhythm, calling scattered Jurchen units toward their leader. More riders converged, increasing pressure around Chun Hung's position. The Ming general recognized the concentration and ordered banners closer. He sought to anchor his formations before the enemy surrounded them. Lu Jun's flanking army remained out of sight beyond distant terrain. Until those troops arrived, Chun Hung needed the center to survive. He led cavalry attacks himself because soldiers followed visible courage. Each personal charge gathered retreating men and restored damaged lines. Jian Guda watched carefully, searching for the moment leadership became exposed. Zhu Ying noticed the two command banners drawing gradually closer. He understood without hearing orders that a commander duel might decide morale. Hundreds of soldiers still separated him from both generals. His immediate concern remained an almost empty first quiver. He reached backward and found only 3 marked arrows. The second quiver remained beneath a dead horse several paces away. Crossing that distance required passing through uncontrolled cavalry movement. Zhu Ying fired the remaining shafts instead of saving them. All 3 found enemies because hesitation offered no value. Then he dropped behind a shield as another volley swept overhead. Arrows, hammered wood, armor earth, and fallen bodies. One pierced his upper arm after passing through weakened leather. Pain flashed sharply while the shaft remained lodged inside. Constitution limited bleeding, but removing it during combat would waste time. Zhu Ying broke the exposed length and continued moving. His soldiers stared because ordinary men usually screamed after such wounds. He told them the arrow had simply chosen a bad target. The joke sounded confident enough to keep panic from spreading. They followed him toward the fallen horse and buried quiver. Zhu Ying moved between collisions, reading animal direction through mastered instinct. He knew which frightened horse would veer before its rider did. He ducked beneath one saber and used the attacker's momentum against another. A short knife from his belt finished the unbalanced rider. 20 speed points arrived as Zhu Ying reached the second quiver. He pulled it free, finding more than 60 arrows intact. The soldiers around him cheered like supply had delivered reinforcements. Zhu Ying immediately returned to shooting from one knee. The lower angle targeted riders' sides beneath raised weapons. Several arrows struck horses instead when armored men offered no opening. Bringing down mounts created barriers that disrupted following cavalry. A fallen horse could break an entire charge more effectively than one corpse. Zhu Ying began selecting targets according to formation rather than individual merit. He shot lead horses in narrow lanes, forcing riders behind to collide. He removed flag carriers, guiding small groups through dust. He killed mounted archers before they completed their own draws. This tactical focus saved soldiers, but occasionally reduced confirmed personal kills. For the first time, Zhu Ying chose command value over system efficiency. The decision proved his growth beyond private stat farming. Every surviving subordinate increased future opportunities more than one immediate reward. The authority seal also made his unit valuable enough to protect carefully. 2 wounded archers tried returning toward the rear. Zhu Ying ordered 4 men to escort them without breaking formation. The remaining soldiers closed gaps and continued shooting. Nearby units saw their order and attached themselves to the improvised line. Within minutes, nearly 40 archers followed Zhu Ying's commands. He had formal authority over only 10, yet crisis created practical leadership. Lula reappeared briefly on horseback and saw the larger group. He directed scattered recruits toward Zhu Ying before charging elsewhere. That confidence carried more weight than any shouted explanation. The young officer organized alternating volleys instead of uncontrolled individual shooting. Half the archers fired, while others knocked and aimed. Then they switched, maintaining constant pressure against approaching riders. The rhythm reduced wasted arrows and protected vulnerable reload moments. Jurchen cavalry turned away twice after losing front ranks. Each retreat gave wounded Ming soldiers several precious seconds. Zhu Ying's group recovered arrows from reachable corpses whenever possible. Marked shafts returned to his quiver with darkened metal tips. The system counted the original kill, not every reuse. Military clerks would later see his carved name repeatedly across the field. A rider carrying a small Jurchen banner approached with 30 followers. Zhu Ying aimed at the flag bearer first. The arrow entered his throat and dropped the signal immediately. Without direction, the group split around fallen horses and exposed its center. Ming spearmen surged forward, stabbing riders from both sides. Zhu Ying recognized the interaction between symbols and battlefield cohesion. Banners were not decorations. They were the army's visible nervous system. That lesson would matter later, when Jian Guda's main standard appeared. The enemy's flanking pressure continued, but coordination steadily weakened. Too many officers, messengers, and flag bearers had fallen. Jian Guda compensated by moving closer and shouting orders personally. His presence rallied nearby fighters while also revealing his location. Chan Heng's banner answered, drawing Ming veterans around their commander. The battlefield began organizing around two competing centers. Between them, ordinary formations were crushed into narrower lanes. Zhu Ying's archers occupied one such lane behind broken shields. They had almost no room to retreat, yet enemies could approach only forward. This turned the chaos into something resembling a deadly shooting gallery. Zhu Ying fired until the second quiver became light. Every release carried more force than the one before. His attributes crossed another unseen cluster of improvements. Eyes tracked tiny motion through dust, smoke, and splashing mud. He could distinguish friendly armor patterns at distances that confused others. That prevented shots from striking Ming soldiers inside mixed combat. One arrow passed inches beside a spearman and killed the rider behind. The spearman glanced backward, shocked, then resumed fighting. Zhu Ying's reputation began spreading before anyone knew his total. Soldiers shouted for the young archer whenever cavalry appeared. He shifted from lane to lane, supporting whichever position threatened collapse. Each movement gathered more frightened recruits behind him. The small banner marker became a rallying point despite its humble rank. Jerkin riders eventually closed too quickly for another organized volley. The last front arrow struck, but surviving horses kept charging. Spearmen braced while several archers fumbled for side weapons. Zhu Ying counted fewer than 10 shafts remaining. He placed 2 final shots into riders leading the approach. Then he slung the bow and reached toward empty air beside his waist. The fine steel saber waited inside storage, ready for its public entrance. Wei Quan's command banner moved through dust toward the trapped archers. The garrison commander raised his weapon and drew breath for an order. Everyone understood. Bows had become useless at this distance. The battlefield was about to demand close combat from every surviving archer. Zhu Ying checked his soldiers and found 7 still standing nearby. 2 were wounded seriously, while 1 had vanished somewhere inside dust. He refused to assume death before the battlefield produced clear evidence. The surviving men shifted from bows toward sabers, knives, and short spears. None possessed the strength to meet mounted charges individually. Together, enhanced by the seal, they could protect one another's openings. Zhu Ying positioned the strongest recruit beside the 2 injured soldiers. Another received responsibility for guarding the small banner marker. Keeping that symbol visible would prevent nearby recruits from losing direction. Lula's lessons about formation suddenly mattered more than personal heroics. Zhu Ying inhaled slowly and felt every growing attribute settle. The broken arrow inside his arm hurt, but movement remained unrestricted. Blood had already stopped beneath the sleeve through abnormal constitution. He smiled toward the approaching riders and prepared the hidden blade. Then Wei Quan's order thundered across the line: abandon bows and draw sabers. Orders disappeared beneath screaming, steel, dust, and panicked horses. Across the ranks, frightened archers reached for blades with shaking hands. Zhu Ying's supposedly safe occupation ended exactly when things became interesting. He called his 10 soldiers together and ordered them to stay close. Terrified voices answered, but every surviving man followed his young banner leader. Zhu Ying pulled the fine steel saber from hidden storage during the confusion. A Jerkin soldier immediately swung at his head, providing convenient testing conditions. Zhu Ying raised the new weapon and blocked with one hand. The enemy blade snapped cleanly, surprising both fighters for different reasons. His return slash removed the man's head before confusion became recovery. 20 more strength points arrived while Zhu Ying collected the fallen ear. Ming soldiers proved melee kills through ears, turning battlefield accounting unusually unpleasant. Several Jerkins saw the young officer and rushed together for an easy kill. His men moved to protect him, empowered by the unseen authority seal. Zhu Ying stepped ahead instead, meeting 5 attackers without retreating. One swing broke a saber and opened the first man's chest. The next cut passed through armor before the second enemy finished shouting. 3 additional movements produced 3 additional bodies on the grass. His steel weapon and rising strength made ordinary defenses almost decorative. Zhu Ying collected 5 ears while his soldiers watched in stunned silence. They had followed a nervous-looking teenager and discovered something resembling a monster. He ordered them forward before it transformed into dangerous battlefield distraction. The small unit entered the melee with Zhu Ying at its center. Every enemy he killed made the next one easier to defeat. Other warriors weakened through exhaustion, wounds, fear, and diminishing breath. Zhu Ying improved continuously, treating attrition like someone else's problem. His authority seal also increased every subordinate's combat ability and endurance. The 10 soldiers began moving with confidence they had never possessed. They guarded flanks, finished wounded enemies, and maintained formation around him. General Chun Hung fought elsewhere from horseback, cutting down Jurkins personally. Ming commanders of that generation had earned rank through countless direct battles. They did not supervise comfortably from hills while ordinary soldiers died. Jian Guda eventually spotted Chun Hung's command flag amid the chaos. He recognized the chance to collapse Ming morale by killing their general. Jurkin cavalry gathered around him and drove toward Chun Hung. The two commanders met with a violent collision of sabers. One exchange showed Jian Guda that his opponent held greater raw strength. Rather than continue honorably, he offered enormous rewards for assistance. The soldier killing Chun Hung would gain rank and 10 captured women. That ugly promise sent nearby Jurkins charging with renewed desperation. They surrounded the Ming general from every direction, attacking horse and rider. Chun Hung struck several down, but numbers steadily compressed his movement. A spear arrived from his blind side and forced a desperate dodge. His saddle shifted, his wounded horse stumbled, and the general hit the ground. Jurkin's soldiers closed eagerly, sensing victory and valuable rewards. Chun Hung understood that one delayed reinforcement had become a death sentence. That was when a blood-covered teenager stepped between Chun Hung and the attackers. Zhu Ying moved through the surrounding Jurkins with terrifying directness. One saber stroke ended one threat, followed immediately by another. The men around Chun Hung fell before they understood the interruption. The general stared upward, trying to identify his unexpected rescuer. Zhu Ying barely glanced down because he had noticed a greater prize. Jian Guda wore iron armor and rode beneath the largest enemy banner. Killing ordinary soldiers provided attributes, ears, and regular military merit. Killing the enemy commander promised a rank-changing achievement and exceptional rewards. Zhu Ying tightened his grip and began running directly toward Jian Guda. Chun Hung shouted for him to stop before suicidal courage wasted everything. The warning lost its argument beneath Zhu Ying's rapidly increasing speed. Jurkin guards stepped between him and their commander, then died one by one. 5 fell, followed by 6 more, each requiring only one clean strike. His speed now exceeded 200, making normal reactions painfully insufficient. Within moments, the young officer stood before the mounted Jurkin commander. One was 13, blood-covered, and smiling like battle, had improved his afternoon. The other was a veteran warlord wondering why nobody had stopped this child. Jian Guda lowered his saber, kicked forward, and attacked with full momentum. The descending strike carried horse speed, body weight, and years of practice. Zhu Ying raised his own blade directly into its path. Steel collided, sparks scattered, and the younger fighter did not move. Jian Guda's confident expression broke before Zhu Ying's increasing counterforce. The horse's legs shook as pressure traveled backward through saddle and rider. Zhu Ying pushed harder, overturning both commander and mount together. Jian Guda crashed into the dirt, trapped momentarily beneath his fallen horse. The greatest Jurkin officer on the field suddenly looked remarkably mortal. Zhu Ying stepped closer before the man could recover or call guards. His saber rose once, then Jian Guda's head separated cleanly. The system announced 100 points added across every attribute. A first 10,000-man commander kill also produced another treasure chest. Power surged through Zhu Ying until every sense burned frighteningly bright. He secured the severed head at his belt and turned toward the banner. The battle was not finished, but its center had just lost everything. Jian Guda's standard still stood behind several guards, frozen by disbelief. Zhu Ying charged them before grief could transform into useful resistance. Each defender received 1 slash, 1 notification, and no second opportunity. The flag-bearer tried retreating while clutching the tall command pole. Zhu Ying cut through both soldier and pole with 1 sweeping strike. The Jurkin banner collapsed across grass, already darkened by blood. He planted 1 boot upon it and raised his dripping saber. And suddenly Zhu Ying roared that Jian Guda was dead, and surrender meant survival. His strengthened voice rolled across the battlefield with startling power. Ancient armies relied upon banners for orders, location, morale, and identity. When the largest flag fell, every distant unit understood the commander had vanished. When Jian Guda's severed head appeared, remaining doubts disappeared with impressive speed. Jurchen formations broke almost simultaneously as men turned toward every possible escape. Warriors who had attacked like wolves suddenly fled, like startled livestock. General Chen Hung watched the collapse while reconsidering several definitions of human ability. At that perfect moment, Lu Jun's flanking divisions reached the battlefield. Fresh Ming soldiers struck both retreat routes and completed the encirclement. The Jurchen defense became a rout, then a one-sided pursuit. Zhu Ying joined immediately because fleeing targets were easier to harvest. For another hour, he ran among cavalry, while collecting attributes and merit. When officers finally stopped the killing, groans replaced battle cries across the field. Medical teams searched survivors while clerks began the unpleasant accounting. Every company presented ears, heads, and arrows bearing carved names. Lula gathered fewer than 70 surviving men from his original 100. Grief crossed his face before military discipline forced it aside. The vice commander called anyone holding proof of personal kills. Several soldiers approached with 1 ear, 2 ears, or perhaps 3. Their achievements looked respectable until Zhu Ying stepped forward quietly. He opened his clothing and dropped 58 bloody ears onto the ground. Then Jian Guda's head landed beside them with considerably greater dramatic effect. Finally, Zhu Ying placed the broken Jurchen command flag across the pile. Nobody spoke because several brains required time to restart. Lula stared between the teenager, the head, and the impossible collection. The military clerk asked whether all 58 ears came from close combat. Zhu Ying confirmed they did, excluding every enemy killed with arrows. 45 named shafts would later be recovered from additional corpses. That produced 103 personal kills during a single battle. The vice commander immediately ordered the report sent directly to senior command. Slaying the enemy commander and capturing his flag represented extraordinary distinguished merit. Such achievement could skip several ranks under Ming military law. Every surviving soldier began watching Zhu Ying like a misplaced war deity. Their expressions politely requested that he never become angry with them. Lula hurried over and discovered wounds across the boy's arms, chest, and back. A broken arrow still protruded from one arm beneath drying blood. Zhu Ying called everything scratches, using that word with heroic generosity. His constitution exceeded 300, causing wounds to clot almost immediately. Blood stopped so quickly that even the army physician looked offended. The doctor warned that removing the arrowhead would hurt badly. Zhu Ying allowed the operation without moving, while Lula worried nearby. The physician cut around the shaft and pulled the metal free. Bleeding continued for several seconds, then closed before the bandage arrived. He stared at the wound as though it had violated medical etiquette. Zhu Ying suggested good family health, which convinced absolutely nobody. After treatment, the hidden panel revealed the battle's enormous gains. Strength approached 500, while speed exceeded 400. Constitution, endurance, and spirit had all risen beyond 300. His storage expanded to 3 cubic meters, tripling its original capacity. Nearly 2 years of additional lifespan had accumulated from kills and corpses. One campaign changed him from enhanced teenager into something genuinely superhuman. Only then Lula sat nearby and joked that Zhu Ying might soon outrank him. Then the commander's humor faded beneath serious concern. He warned that charging a 10,000-man commander alone was not courage. It was reckless madness. Wearing a very impressive military uniform, more battles would come, but only if Zhu Ying survived this one. The boy promised greater caution while privately planning almost none. Power remained the only reliable defense against the Shen family's influence. Official rank would let him crush them legally instead of hiding forever. Rank required merit, and merit required risks that sensible people avoided. Lula left to check wounded soldiers across the shattered company. Zhu Ying immediately noticed hundreds of untouched corpses across the field. Cleanup teams approached, threatening to bury his unclaimed system rewards. He rose with professional seriousness and began checking bodies personally. Observers praised his vigilance against enemies pretending to be dead. In reality, each touch produced strength, speed, constitution, endurance, or lifespan. He crossed the battlefield like a customer racing through a closing market. One point seemed small until several hundred bodies contributed together. Night arrived before Zhu Ying finished the largest accessible clusters. Supply troops established camp and distributed hot food to exhausted survivors. Zhu Yuanzhang terrified officials, but ensured frontier soldiers received proper provisions. Crown Prince Zhu Biao's supervision made theft from military supplies especially dangerous. Inside the command tent, Chen Heng and Lu Jun reviewed their victory. Lu Jun teased his colleague about nearly dying before reinforcements arrived. Chen Heng blamed the delay, while both quietly understood their miscalculation. The Jurchens possessed better weapons and armor than older reports suggested. Mongol rule had carried Chinese forging knowledge into northern territories. Underestimating those tribes again would invite a much more expensive lesson. Prefect Bu and entered, eager for numbers and political opportunity. The generals reported more than 5,800 enemies killed. 3,000 prisoners had been captured for interrogation and later processing. Ming losses reached 3,780 dead. Another 2,500 soldiers required treatment for serious wounds. Buen still considered the result decisive and immediately prepared a victory dispatch. Chen Heng then produced a separate report concerning one extraordinary young soldier. Buen opened it casually, read twice, and lost every trace of composure. The document credited Zhu Ying with 103 confirmed kills. 45 came through archery and 58 through close combat. It also stated he personally killed Jian Guda and destroyed the enemy standard. Chen Heng confirmed witnessing the commander's death at dangerously close range. Silence occupied the tent before astonished voices erupted from every direction. Veteran officers compared the feat with legendary warriors from older dynasties. Even famous founders of Ming had rarely recorded such numbers in one battle. Someone asked how many promotions the military code allowed for this. Kill count alone justified 4 rank advancements from small banner leader. Slaying Jian Guda and taking the battle flag justified 1 additional rank. 5 steps above small banner leader stood 1,000-man commander. No ordinary recruit had climbed that distance in a single day. The emperor himself had written merit laws preventing commanders from ignoring achievement. Nobody in the tent felt brave enough to argue against those rules. Buen also recognized the political value of Zhu Ying's story. A routine border victory might receive little attention inside Nanjing. A teenager killing 103 enemies would reach the throne immediately. Every officer above him could claim credit for discovering and supporting talent. Zhu Ying had become a career opportunity wearing blood-stained armor. Buen ordered the battlefield reports verified and prepared without delay. He also demanded the young soldier appear before the assembled command staff. Outside, Wei Quan found Zhu Ying eating beside an ordinary campfire. The garrison commander now looked at his former recruit with genuine respect. He announced the achievement publicly to soldiers gathered nearby. Murmurs became disbelief when everyone heard the number 103. Men stared at Zhu Ying's narrow shoulders and reconsidered appearances forever. Wei Quan then escorted him toward the central command tent. Zhu Ying calculated the likely promotion while walking between guarded banners. 5 ranks would place 1,000 soldiers beneath his authority. 3 months earlier, the Shen family expected him to disappear anonymously. Now, senior generals waited to reward him before imperial reports traveled south. He entered, saluted formally, and found every officer studying his face. Several expected a giant veteran rather than a beautiful young scholar. Death apparently arrived in unexpectedly small and polite packaging. Buen asked his real age, service history, and exact actions. Zhu Ying maintained the forged age of 16 inside official records. Admitting 13 would expose document fraud and complicate everything immediately. Chen Heng described how the boy saved him before attacking Jian Guda. The prefect asked whether any witnesses disputed the recorded kills. Military inspectors, arrow clerks, and company officers all confirmed the evidence. Buen stood and formally announced advancement under Ming merit law. Zhu Ying rose 5 ranks to become a 1,000-man commander. He received authority over 1,000 soldiers and 100 taels of gold. Gold, not silver, made the reward feel dramatically heavier. Attendants presented officer armor, an official saber, and a ceremonial sword. The saber represented battlefield command, while the sword marked formal military status. Buen personally handed over the commission and predicted greater achievements. Zhu Ying promised loyalty while mentally performing several celebratory cartwheels. The prefect announced that the entire report would travel directly to Nanjing. Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang and Crown Prince Zhu Biao would learn his name. Every officer suddenly viewed Zhu Ying as potential imperial attention. Chun Hung revealed an open cavalry command created by battle casualties. Zhu Ying would take 1,000 riders within the general's division. The assignment matched the horsemanship mastery already stored inside his mind. 3 weeks earlier, he barely knew which side of a horse faced forward. Now, he would command an entire cavalry regiment across the northern frontier. Chun Hung invited him to sit among senior officers for strategic discussion. Zhu Ying took the offered chair, acting calmer than his excitement. Lu Jun reported pursuit forces had driven survivors for north. Captured Ming civilians were being recovered and returned from Jurchen custody. The immediate border attack had been broken, but larger dangers remained. Northern Yuan forces were gathering while Ming armies prepared their own offensive. Daning's remaining bandits still needed elimination before supply routes became secure. Buan ended the meeting and ordered commanders to rebuild damaged formations. When Zhu Ying returned outside, the system recognized his dramatic appointment. The 1,000-man authority seal replaced his earlier small banner version. Soldiers under his command now received stronger improvements during battle. Combat power, courage, and endurance rose further while he remained their commander. His private supernatural advantage had expanded from 10 men to 1,000. 1,000 cavalry with invisible enhancements could strike far above ordinary strength. Zhu Ying finally found privacy inside his newly assigned officer tent. Several unopened treasure chests waited from kills, milestones, and promotion. Zhu Ying locked the tent, lowered the lamp, and summoned every reward together. 10 treasure chests hovered across the panel, crowded together like impatient creditors. 5 skipped promotions had multiplied the pile almost as much as battlefield killing. He opened them quickly before anticipation turned him into a grinning idiot. The first delivered Pierce Willow at 100 paces as complete archery mastery. Distance became timing, wind became calculation, and moving targets became future positions. His strength could now drive perfect shots through armor instead of merely touching it. The second chest produced a black and gold treasure-carved bow built for monstrous draw weight. Zhu Ying pulled the string halfway and felt the weapon absorb his power calmly. For once, the equipment looked less fragile than the teenager holding it. 3 combat manuals followed almost together, ending the pleasant simplicity immediately. Wild Dance Saber taught relentless pressure, changing angles, and aggressive control. Divine Arrow Barrage coordinated several lethal releases through one continuous motion. Mountain Crushing Fist concentrated his entire body behind one brutally efficient impact. Unlike Pierce Willow, all 3 required practice before theory became reliable instinct. Zhu Ying tested one partial fist motion and made the nearest tent pole complain. He stopped before his first act as commander became destroying his own quarters. The 6th chest offered a single high-quality healing pill for catastrophic injuries. Its value silenced him because many soldiers had died from wounds this small medicine could reverse. He stored it carefully, uncertain whose life would someday justify using it. The final 4 chests changed the room from exciting to politically dangerous. One delivered controlled steel production methods beyond ordinary frontier workshops. Another contained safer gunpowder formulas, stronger barrels, and improved ignition systems. The 9th expanded storage and added 600 taels of gold without visible weight. The last supplied crossbows, layered armor, standardized parts, and improved siege designs. The combat rewards could win duels, rescue officers, and break enemy formations. The manufacturing knowledge could strengthen armies, economies, and whoever controlled both. That made the final chests more dangerous than every blade inside his storage. Any emperor would reward this knowledge generously, then ensure its owner never escaped. Zhu Ying stopped smiling and began making rules before excitement became stupidity. First, no workshop would receive complete designs until he possessed political protection. Second, no improved firearm would appear publicly without a believable development process. Third, the healing pill would remain untouched except during genuine mortal danger. The bow and steel saber returned to storage beside his growing emergency fortune. 600 gold taels could purchase craftsmen, land, supplies, or independent information. For now, secrecy made the money more valuable than immediate spending. He reviewed how the new combat skills supported one another instead of listing trophies. Pierce Willow supplied perfect accuracy, while the carved bow supplied devastating force. Divine Arrow Barrage could remove several mounted threats before a charge reached formation. Wild Dance Saber controlled close combat when enemies survived the arrows. Mountain Crushing Fist remained an emergency answer for armor, gates, or terrible judgment. The healing pill was different because using it would reveal both mercy and weakness. Saving the wrong person could expose him. Refusing the right person could destroy loyalty. Power had already created choices more complicated than simply killing whoever approached. His modern memories offered knowledge, but history also taught ownership followed invention. An unprotected inventor became property, evidence, or a conveniently forgotten corpse. A decorated commander could choose his patrons and release improvements gradually. That meant rank protected his future inventions as much as armor protected flesh. The rewards formed a ladder rather than a pile of unrelated miracles. Combat techniques kept him alive long enough to earn authority. Medicine could preserve irreplaceable allies when ordinary treatment failed. Gold purchased independence from merchants who expected obedience with every loan. Industrial knowledge could eventually turn temporary victories into lasting national strength. But none of those advantages could command 1,000 skeptical cavalrymen tomorrow. No treasure chest created trust, discipline, logistics, or obedience during confusion. Those rewards had to be earned from living soldiers rather than collected from corpses. The casualty roster waiting beside his lamp suddenly looked heavier than the gold. 700 veterans remained, each carrying memories of officers who had failed them. Hundreds of replacements would arrive later with different fears and weaker experience. Zhu Ying realized the most difficult reward was responsibility for people who could die. He kept official armor and weapons visible for every routine inspection. System equipment would appear only when battlefield confusion protected its origin. Legal salary and promotion rewards would explain future spending whenever possible. Miracles survived longer when surrounded by receipts, witnesses, and extremely boring paperwork. He closed the chest panel, but the promotion still carried one final consequence. The upgraded authority seal pulsed before he could dismiss the system completely. As a small banner leader, 10 soldiers had received modest 10% improvements. 5 rapid promotions changed the seal far more dramatically than expected. Now, 1,000 direct subordinates gained 60% combat power under his command. Morale rose by the same amount, making panic harder to spread through formation. Endurance also increased, allowing exhausted men to function beyond ordinary limits. The enhancement could transform average cavalry into something resembling veteran elites. It could not rescue foolish orders, broken supplies, or commanders hiding behind banners. The system had stopped, rewarding only the strength of Zhu Ying's own hands. It was pushing him toward building an organization capable of holding what he conquered. Below 1,000-man rank, personal kills could still justify direct advancement. Beyond that point, captured objectives and protected forces mattered more than individual bodies. He needed victories, territory, surviving soldiers, and strategic results recorded by witnesses. One man could break a gate, but an institution could hold it afterward. That realization changed how Zhu Ying studied the cavalry roster delivered by Chen Heng. Battle losses had reduced the available regiment to roughly 700 veterans. Their previous commander remained too badly wounded to continue active leadership. Several hundred positions would be filled later from reorganized frontier units. For now, Zhu Ying needed trust from men who had never served him. The record listed officers, casualties, horses, equipment, and recent discipline problems. Zhang Wu commanded one large surviving section with proven battlefield experience. Fan Sheng controlled another group and viewed youthful leadership with understandable caution. A separate personnel memorandum mentioned Li Tao, an officer outside the current regiment. His recommendations favored shallow patrols and rejected deep raids under almost every condition. Zhu Ying remembered the name, unsure whether it represented wisdom or fear. He refused to judge an absent officer before actions supplied real evidence. The note still offered a useful warning about caution becoming self-protection. Caution protected soldiers. Cowardice protected only the officer giving orders. Zhu Ying would wait until pressure revealed which instinct controlled Li Tao. Records could describe men, but never predict who would hold when formation broke. Only action under pressure could separate caution, fear, and dependable judgment. He marked every officer requiring personal observation during the next campaign. Zhang Wu carried experience, while Fan Sheng carried doubts that deserved answers. Li Tao remained only a name attached to unusually defensive recommendations. Zhu Ying set the memorandum aside rather than manufacturing an enemy early. The soldiers before him mattered more than suspicions about future assignments. He needed one trusted officer who understood both loyalty and practical warfare. That role already belonged to Lula, regardless of their reversed ranks. Lula would become captain of Zhu Ying's 50 personal guards. That appointment allowed the former commander to stay close without losing dignity. Zhu Ying felt relieved because Lula understood both loyalty and practical warfare. He also knew the truth behind the forged enlistment better than most. The officer network around Zhu Ying was developing through shared battle rather than family. That distinction mattered because purchased loyalty vanished when prices changed. Men who survived beside him possessed memories harder to replace. Zhu Ying drafted his first formal address several times. Grand promises sounded childish, while excessive modesty weakened authority. He finally chose a direct standard based entirely on actions. He would fight where danger stood, rather than command from distant safety. He would reward merit, punish cowardice, and never steal soldiers' achievements. Any man following orders would receive his protection. Any officer abandoning men for private survival would answer publicly. These principles reflected what Zhu Ying wanted from commanders above him. They also created expectations he would need to honor consistently. Leadership sounded easier before 1,000 lives depended upon it. He practiced the address silently while changing into training clothing. Then Wild Dance Saber began beneath the dim lamp. The first sequence used a rising diagonal cut, followed by immediate reversal. The second shifted body weight forward without sacrificing balance. The third transformed a block strike into close-range pressure. Zhu Ying repeated each motion slowly until transitions felt natural. Speed came later because incorrect habits multiplied danger. The technique urged aggression, but discipline controlled its direction. Hours passed as sweat darkened the floor beneath his feet. His strength made every accidental contact dangerous to tent poles. Even that handle cracked after several stronger rotations. Mountain-crushing fist required an entirely different rhythm. Wild dance flowed continuously, while the fist gathered everything into one moment. Feet gripped earth, hips turned, spine aligned, and shoulder delivered. Zhu Ying struck a folded blanket hanging from a support. The impact burst its TIs and launched it across the tent. He reduced power immediately before someone outside investigated. Divine arrow barrage could not be practiced fully indoors. Instead, Zhu Ying rehearsed finger placement and rapid knocking without release. The movements initially tangled despite complete theoretical understanding. After several hundred repetitions, both hands began cooperating naturally. His speed attribute shortened the learning curve beyond ordinary training. Pierce Willow also altered how his eyes examined objects. Every hanging cord became a potential target with distance and angle. Every moving shadow produced automatic predictions of future position. Zhu Ying understood why true masters described techniques as changing perception. The world itself looked different when useful details became visible. Iron body training followed after every exhausting combat practice session. Warm currents moved through exhausted muscles and repaired minor strain. 10 points entered strength, constitution, and endurance at completion. The numbers pushed his body closer to another milestone threshold. He summoned the panel and reviewed the combined result. Strength approached 600 after battlefield rewards and nightly cultivation. Speed remained slightly lower, but far beyond normal reaction. Constitution ensured cuts closed rapidly and bones resisted terrible impact. Endurance promised prolonged combat without any meaningful physical decline. Spirit supported concentration during increasingly complex command responsibilities. Lifespan continued growing beyond the original 88-year estimate. Zhu Ying wondered whether enough wars could make aging optional. Then he remembered most wars killed people who lacked convenient systems. The thought cooled his excitement and restored necessary seriousness. His growth depended upon death. Even when enemies deserved opposition, he could enjoy survival without pretending blood carried no moral weight. That balance would become harder as power made killing easier. The Shen family deserved punishment, but revenge could not guide every campaign. Soldiers needed a commander, not a teenager chasing private anger. Zhu Ying therefore separated goals inside his mind. First came protecting his force and fulfilling military orders. Second came gathering strength through opportunities created by those duties. Third came building rank, wealth, and independent influence. Revenge would arrive only after those foundations became secure. This sequence prevented impatience from exposing everything too early. He stored the system panel and checked the air outside. The camp had grown quiet except for sentries and wounded men. Several admired him, while others expected luck to end quickly. Zhu Ying could not demand confidence before proving himself as their officer. Tomorrow's cavalry formation would begin that difficult leadership test. He also considered the imperial report already traveling southward. If it reached Zhu Yuanzhang, attention could protect or endanger him. The emperor rewarded merit, but investigated unusual people relentlessly. A 13-year-old with impossible strength could become a suspicious curiosity. Maintaining the forged age of 16, therefore remained essential. Even 16 looked extraordinary, but at least military records supported it. Zhu Ying needed every witness repeating the same official identity. Lula already suspected the truth, yet remained trustworthy. The Shen family knew his real age and could weaponize that knowledge. Exposing their forgery would also implicate the Shen family directly. That mutual danger created temporary protection through shared evidence. Zhu Ying planned eventually to control the narrative before they acted. Official success would make his testimony more credible than merchant denials. He could then reveal everything as attempted murder, not fraudulent enlistment. The military might forgive a victim whose service produced major victories. It would not forgive civilians who corrupted registration for private schemes. This legal calculation mattered nearly as much as combat strength. Zhu Ying's modern memories helped him think through institutions and incentives. He did not trust justice automatically, but understood leverage. Rank, witnesses, documents, imperial notice, and military patrons formed that leverage. Chen Heng now owed his life personally after the battlefield rescue. Lula owed his life from the bandit leader's attack. Wei Quan benefited from achievements produced by his former subordinate. Buan's victory dispatch linked his career to Zhu Ying's success. Each relationship made quiet disappearance more difficult to arrange. The Shen family's earlier plan depended upon nobody caring whether he lived. That condition had vanished completely after one battle. Zhu Ying smiled, imagining Shen Wanzhen reading the official promotion notice. The old merchant would discover that frontier death had promoted his problem. Assassins now faced military guards, camp discipline, and public attention. Every failed attempt could reveal the conspiracy further. Still, Zhu Ying refused to underestimate wealth and political connections. Lu Hao's palace relationship might influence officials for beyond Beiping. The best defense remained, becoming too valuable for powerful people to sacrifice. Tomorrow, 1,000 cavalrymen would decide whether he looked valuable or lucky. Zhu Ying ended training, washed blood and sweat from his skin, then rested. His endurance made sleep less necessary, but judgment still benefited from quiet. Before closing his eyes, he opened storage and touched the treasure-carved bow. The weapon represented everything the Shen family never expected him to possess. Power, opportunity, secrecy, and future command waited together in that dark space. Outside, the first hint of dawn appeared beyond rows of military tents. Lula would soon arrive with 50 guards and formal reports. 700 cavalry veterans would measure their young commander with skeptical eyes. Zhu Ying had survived as archer, fighter, and system user. The next morning would test whether he could truly become a leader. His battle report continued south while he slept beneath imperial banners. By sunrise, several different futures were already moving toward his name. The emperor who ruled China would soon read the name Zhu Ying. That development mattered because Zhu Yuanzhang rarely forgot unusual military talent. His court rewarded merit generously, provided the report survived ruthless verification. False claims could destroy officers, clerks, witnesses, and several unfortunate relatives. Zhu Ying's evidence was real, signed, counted, and impossible to dismiss. Chen Heng expected the capital to celebrate a rare frontier prodigy. Buan expected recognition for supporting that prodigy before everyone else. Lu Jun wanted to witness the boy's next impossible performance. None of them understood the system quietly multiplying beneath each victory. What none of them knew was the Shen family was still arranging Zhu Ying's murder. But that danger remained far away. Morning found Zhu Ying wearing his new armor. Lula waited outside with 50 soldiers chosen as personal guards. The former commander now reported formally to the teenager he once protected. Zhu Ying found the reversed hierarchy amusing, but deeply appreciated Lula's loyalty. He inspected armor, horses, bows, sabers, and each guard's battlefield experience. Personal guards needed discipline because they would protect command signals during chaos. Beyond them waited hundreds of cavalrymen from damaged and reorganized companies. Only 700 riders remained available after the earlier battle. 2 officers of 1,000-man rank, Zhang Wu and Fan Sheng, stood beside their formations. Both veterans doubted taking orders from someone barely old enough to shave. Zhu Ying understood their suspicion and addressed every rider directly. He promised to lead from the front rather than hide behind banners. Any order he gave would be one he accepted personally. If he ever fled first, his men could take his head. That statement shocked the officers and electrified the surviving cavalry. They had already heard about 103 kills and Jianguda's head. To them, Zhu Ying was not a child, but proven battlefield violence. 700 voices pledged loyalty while the new authority seal awakened. Every rider unknowingly gained stronger courage, endurance, and combat ability. Zhu Ying felt the formation change as fear gave way to confidence. He now needed victories as a commander, not merely personal kill counts. The system had shifted his path from warrior toward leader and strategist. Inside Nanjing, the imperial court began its own much grander mourning. Zhu Yuanzhang sat upon the dragon throne while ministers bowed below. Crown Prince Zhu Biao stood nearby, calm enough to soften the hall. The revenue minister reported grain collected from 8 major prefectures. Supply convoys already moved toward Danning and other northern staging grounds. Within weeks, provisions would support 200,000 soldiers for several months. Zhu Yuanzhang offered brief approval, terrifyingly generous by his normal standards. The Minister of War then confirmed Feng Sheng's army was mobilizing. Famous founding generals would command separate wings beneath the Duke of Song. Their target was Northern Yuan commander Nagachu and his frontier power base. Zhu Yuanzhang had once captured Nagachu and released him through mercy. The Mongol commander repaid that mercy by rebuilding forces against Ming. The emperor had stored that lesson carefully. Beside many future executions, a messenger suddenly arrived carrying Daning's victory dispatch. The main report described the Jurchen defeat, casualties, prisoners, and recovered territory. Ministers offered predictable praise concerning imperial virtue and eternal Ming radiance. Then Zhu Yuanzhang noticed a smaller document attached behind the official summary. He opened it, read one line, and made a rare confused sound. The entire court stopped breathing because imperial confusion often preceded danger. Zhu Biao accepted the paper and read the extraordinary personal achievement. A military clerk was ordered to announce everything aloud. The report named small banner leader Zhu Ying from the first company. He had killed 45 enemies with arrows and 58 by saber. He had also slain Jianguda and brought down the Jurchen flag. 103 confirmed kills belonged to a single young soldier. The hall fell silent before ministers began questioning whether this was possible. Signed military inspection records made fabrication punishable by death. Nobody involved would invent numbers capable of killing their entire family. Several veteran officials compared the achievement with famous historical champions. Zhu Yuanzhang remembered his own fiercest founding warrior, already dead for years. That legend had never recorded such a single battle total. For a moment, old grief crossed the emperor's otherwise dangerous face. Zhu Biao reminded him that living talent should be protected and cultivated. The emperor agreed, calling Zhu Ying a blessing for the dynasty. Then Zhu Biao repeated the young soldier's full name. The surname Zhu caused a faint reaction. Zhu Yuanzhang quickly concealed. Some old memory stirred, connected to losses sealed away from public discussion. Still, the emperor confirmed Bu An's promotion decision without hesitation. He ordered the achievement circulated throughout every Ming military unit. Soldiers across the empire would hear what one frontier recruit accomplished. The story could inspire courage before the coming Northern Yuan campaign. Zhu Yuanzhang also warned Danning to prepare for severe retaliation. The Jurchens and Northern Yuan would not accept humiliation quietly. Danning's army must hold whatever pressure arrived until Feng Sheng reached them. The border force was bait, while 200,000 soldiers formed the real strike. Nagachu would focus southward until imperial armies reached his vulnerable flank. Thousands of miles away, Zhu Ying knew nothing about his new fame. He was more concerned with choosing saddles and testing the graded bow. He also knew nothing about the emperor's reaction to his surname. After court ended, Zhu Yuanzhang walked alone toward a sealed palace. Only he and Zhu Biao could enter the quiet memorial chamber. Inside rested tablets belonging to the family members he missed most. The first honored his late wife without grand imperial titles. The second belonged to a child lost before the dynasty stabilized. The third represented a grandson whose death had never stopped hurting. Zhu Yuanzhang had built an empire, yet could not command death backward. The name Zhu Ying had touched something buried inside that grief. He wondered whether fate was returning a forgotten debt through another young soldier. No answer came from the tablets, only incense, smoke, and memory. The feared emperor allowed himself tears where no minister could watch. Then he regained control and returned to the machinery of war. At the frontier, Zhu Ying led his new cavalry on active patrol. His authority seal kept the riders alert through long hours in the saddle. Scouts discovered a group of Jurchen fighters escorting captured civilians. Zhu Ying recognized the chance for practical command experience and system rewards. He ordered the cavalry to spread and cut every escape route. The Jurchen leaders saw mounted soldiers approaching and charged with admirable stubbornness. Zhu Ying respected the courage while preparing to kill him anyway. One stroke from the graded saber ended the man's attack instantly. The system granted endurance, and Zhu Ying continued without slowing. His cavalry followed, striking the smaller enemy group from 3 directions. More than 100 Jurchen fighters tried forming a defensive ring. Against enhanced Ming riders, their resistance lasted less than 1 minute. Zhu Ying moved through them like a blade pushed through loose fabric. When fighting ended, more than 1,000 Jurchen civilians remained surrounded. Their expressions mixed terror, hatred, and desperate uncertainty. Zhang Wu asked what should happen to the captured population. Zhu Ying asked what Jurchens did when Ming villages fell. The officer answered without hesitation, because frontier survivors knew the pattern. Men were killed, women abused, children taken, and homes burned. Zhu Ying's decision became hard, practical, and deliberately merciless. Armed men and those capable of reporting their force could not leave. The campaign operated deep inside hostile territory with limited numbers. Released prisoners could reveal direction, strength, routes, and daily movements. Every escaped tongue might eventually cost dozens of Ming lives. Zhu Ying ordered his soldiers to eliminate threats while sparing useful intelligence sources. The young commander felt the moral weight even while accepting military necessity. This was no heroic game, despite treasure chests and glowing stat numbers. Power did not erase consequences. It merely made decisions possible. His men carried out orders quickly and recovered captive Ming civilians. The rescued people wept, bowed, and described nearby Jurchen movements. Several reported reinforcements arriving from deeper northern settlements. Zhu Ying sent scouts forward and messengers back toward Chunheng. He then moved the civilians south beneath a protected escort. The cavalry returned with prisoners, intelligence, and no significant losses. Veteran officers began viewing their teenage commander with genuine professional respect. His courage was obvious, but his battlefield judgment mattered even more. Zhu Ying rewarded scouts, rotated exhausted mounts, and checked injured soldiers personally. The authority seal improved performance, yet good leadership kept men loyal. That evening, imperial notices reached the larger frontier camp. Every formation heard the official account of Zhu Ying's earlier victory. His own cavalry shouted until nearby units joined the celebration. Zhu Ying accepted congratulations while silently blaming the Shen family again. Their plan had turned his name into military propaganda across China. In Beiping, news of the promotion eventually entered the Shen mansion. Shen Wanzhen read the report and initially suspected a cruel joke. The expendable orphan was now a 1,000-man commander with imperial recognition. His sons understood that their unfinished problem had become much more dangerous. Killing an unknown recruit could disappear beneath frontier chaos. Killing a celebrated officer would trigger investigations and imperial anger. The engagement scandal also threatened humiliation if Zhu Ying returned openly. One son argued they should send faster, more professional assassins. Another suggested political pressure through Lu Hao's palace connections. Shen Wanzhen demanded caution while refusing to abandon the problem. Their wealth had solved everything before, so they trusted wealth again. Shen Yi secretly heard enough to understand Zhu Ying remained in danger. She began searching for merchants traveling toward Danning. A warning letter might reach him if family servants did not intercept it. The woman had little authority, but refused to remain furniture. Meanwhile, Zhu Ying trained nightly and expanded every physical advantage. Iron body technique continued adding reliable gains after each complete session. Wild dance saber required repeated movement until aggression became instinct. Divine arrow barrage punished his fingers, shoulders, and bowstrings during practice. Mountain crushing fist produced dents inside wooden training posts. He concealed the worst damage to avoid explaining impossible strength. Several days passed while Danning's army pressed north in careful stages. Jurchen forces retreated rather than offering another decisive engagement. Each withdrawal stretched Ming supply routes farther from fortified territory. Scouts reported a major settlement 30 miles ahead with heavy defenses. Northern Yuan reinforcements were also moving toward the same region. Buan gathered every general and senior commander for strategic discussion. Chun Hung explained the enemy's deliberate retreat and delaying strategy. The Jurchens wanted Ming forces chasing deeper until supply lines became fragile. Then Yuan troops could strike from the east while Jurchens attacked north. The army risked entrapment between two enemies without secure food or retreat. Nobody wanted to recommend withdrawal because it sounded cowardly. Nobody wanted to recommend advance because it sounded potentially fatal. The officers studied their boots, maps, sleeves, and suddenly, fascinating furniture. Zhu Ying finally requested permission to present an alternative. Buan recognized him immediately and invited the suggestion with visible relief. The young commander proposed splitting forces instead of choosing advance or retreat. One division would strike eastward into Yuan territory on Liaodong. Another force would hold Jurchen attention across the northern approaches. Daning's prefect would return south to secure walls, supplies, and communication. The maneuver would threaten enemy territory while preventing both forces from combining. It would also support Feng Sheng's secret approach against Nagachu. Chun Hung studied the map and slowly understood the larger possibility. If Ming cavalry raided east, Yuan commanders might divert troops from Daning. If another unit harassed Jurchens, northern pressure would remain divided. The plan was aggressive, flexible, and extremely dangerous for the smaller force. Buan asked who should command the cavalry remaining among the Jurchens. Silence returned with even greater speed than before. That assignment meant several thousand riders facing a population exceeding 1 million. The Jurchens could gather tens of thousands once scattered warriors united. Northern Yuan reinforcements might increase those numbers beyond safe calculation. Military merit meant little if nobody returned to receive it. Zhu Ying stepped forward and volunteered without visible hesitation. Several officers admired his courage, while others questioned his relationship with survival. Chun Hung asked whether he fully understood the danger. Zhu Ying understood perfectly, which was exactly why he wanted it. An independent force inside enemy territory offered constant combat and minimal supervision. For a normal commander, the mission resembled delayed suicide. For Zhu Ying, resembled unlimited system farming with cavalry support. Buan asked how many additional riders he required. Zhu Ying requested 4,000 experienced cavalry and sufficient dried provisions. Combined with his surviving men, 5,000 would move quickly enough. They could raid, vanish, and force every Jurchen commander to chase shadows. The authority seal would secretly make those 5,000 resemble a larger army. Buan consulted Chun Hung, then made a startling immediate decision. Zhu Ying received temporary promotion to deputy garrison commander. 5,000 cavalry and 4 commanders of 1,000-man rank would serve beneath him. Any officer disobeying operational orders could face execution under military law. The commission represented another rank gained within roughly 1 week. Fan Sheng remained with the recovering garrison, leaving 4 commanders for the northern mission. Zhu Ying accepted formally and promised to contain the northern threat. Inside, he wondered whether promotions could eventually cause altitude sickness. The dangerous mission had become his first independent military command. 5,000 enhanced riders were about to enter hostile territory behind him. After accepting command, Zhu Ying found Chun Hung waiting outside the tent. The general looked angry, worried, and strangely close to grieving. He demanded to know whether Zhu Ying had prepared final letters. The young commander objected that writing last words while alive felt unnecessarily pessimistic. Chun Hung remained serious because he expected the mission to become fatal. He asked whether any family should receive Zhu Ying's belongings. The answer was painfully short: an elderly butler and nobody else. His grandmother had died, leaving Zhu Ying without home or protection. For several breaths, Chun Hung saw a lonely child beneath the armor. He placed one hand upon Zhu Ying's shoulder without offering empty comfort. The gesture carried more genuine care than the Shen family ever provided. Zhu Ying promised to return and buy the general drinks. Chun Hung corrected him, insisting the survivor would receive drinks instead. They exchanged a salute, both understanding the danger differently. Chun Hung saw 5,000 riders entering a likely death trap. Zhu Ying saw an armed escort toward unlimited enemies and increasing power. His attributes approached 600 across every major category. The graded bow, steel saber, cultivation, and combat techniques amplify those numbers. Every kill would improve him during the mission, rather than exhaust him. That advantage transformed a suicidal assignment into an escalating battlefield engine. What Zhu Ying did not know was another powerful prince had received his report. Prince Zhu Di governed the northern region from his strong base in Beiping. He was Zhu Yuanzhang's son, a seasoned commander, and future historical rebel. At this moment, however, his father and elder brother remained alive. Any visible ambition could bring execution long before destiny arrived. Zhu Di studied the account of 103 kills with interest. His officers envied Chen Heng for discovering such a fierce young commander. One advisor suggested quietly bringing Zhu Ying into the prince's personal circle. Zhu Di's expression turned cold enough to end that suggestion immediately. Recruiting famous officers secretly would resemble preparing rebellion against his father. The advisor dropped to his knees and requested forgiveness. Zhu Di then allowed casual contact only if campaign circumstances created it naturally. After everyone left, the prince warned someone hidden behind the inner chamber. The unseen speaker was pushing plans far too boldly while Zhu Yuanzhang lived. A calm monk answered that he merely prepared for heaven's future arrangement. His name was Yao Guangxiu, a strategist wearing black religious robes. Years later, this quiet advisor would help Zhu Di seize the throne. He once promised the prince a white hat, a coded symbol of emperorship. Zhu Di feared the implication while secretly burning with undeniable ambition. Yao Guangxiu advised patience because destiny needed no reckless announcement. Now, the monk had heard Zhu Ying's name for the first time. A transmigrator, a future rebel emperor, and history's dangerous monk were converging. Zhu Ying knew none of this while organizing horses, supplies, and officers. 5,000 cavalry required food, arrows, replacement mounts, and disciplined communication. 4,000 man commanders reported beneath him beside Zhang Wu and Wei Quan. Zhang Wu remained fiercely loyal after witnessing earlier victories. Wei Quan, once Zhu Ying's garrison superior, now served under his command. Lu Hu appeared practical, disciplined, and willing to follow evidence. But then the name from that cautious memorandum finally gained a face: Li Tao. His expression tightened whenever Zhu Ying discussed speed, depth, or decisive attacks. Zhu Ying recognized fear beneath the arguments, but delayed judgment until action proved it. The cavalry departed northward in organized columns beneath minimal baggage. Speed mattered more than comfort while operating so deep behind hostile lines. Scouts ranged ahead, mapping water, settlements, patrols, and possible ambush routes. Rear guards rotated constantly to prevent riders from disappearing unnoticed. The authority seal strengthened every soldier, but Zhu Ying still enforced rest. Good horses required careful pacing in when enhanced riders felt tireless. The force covered enormous distance before Jurchen scouts discovered their movement. Small enemy patrols approached, observed, and tried escaping with reports. Zhu Ying personally led pursuit whenever speed could prevent information leaks. His mastered horsemanship made impossible turns feel natural beneath the saddle. Divine Arrow Barrage removed several messengers before they reached distant hills. Each kill added attributes while preserving strategic surprise. The cavalry captured one surviving scout and questioned him immediately. He revealed a blue banner settlement ahead, with tens of thousands nearby. 4 satellite camps guarded its north, south, east, and west approaches. Each outer camp could reinforce neighbors or protect the central population. Northern Yuan soldiers were expected soon, increasing the dangerous concentration. Zhu Ying ordered continued reconnaissance before selecting any attack plan. Li Tao argued for circling harmlessly, creating noise, then returning south. Zhang Wu asked whether wander aimlessly counted as military strategy. Li Tao replied that preserving 5,000 lives mattered more than glory. The argument revealed fear disguised beneath reasonable caution. Zhu Ying understood caution, but passive patrols would accomplish nothing. The Jurchens could ignore distant harassment and march south whenever ready. The mission required forcing every enemy eye toward Zhu Ying's cavalry. That meant inflicting damage impossible for commanders to overlook. Scouts returned after nightfall with a complete sketch of the settlement. The central camp held families, stores, animals, and the command headquarters. Satellite camps formed mutually supporting defensive buffers around it. South faced Ming territory and therefore held the strongest defenders. East and west maintained mobile reserves ready to reinforce quickly. North seemed quiet because it opened toward deep Jurchen lands. No rational Ming force would approach from the enemy's own heartland. Zhu Ying smiled because irrational directions often created excellent surprise. He gathered his 4,000-man commanders around the map. Li Tao repeated that any direct attack would risk catastrophic losses. Zhu Ying agreed and announced they would not attack directly. Instead, 1,000 riders would strike the southern camp as a diversion. They only needed arrows, fire, noise, and an immediate retreat. The other 4,000 would circle far north through darkness. Once southern alarms pulled reserves away, Zhu Ying would enter from behind. The plan required precise timing and complete secrecy. Li Tao stared at the map, realizing which assignment belonged to him. Zhu Ying offered him command of the southern diversion with clear conditions. He did not need to conquer, occupy, or hold any position. He only needed to make the attack look larger and more dangerous. Afterward, Li Tao could return south without desertion charges. His successful diversion would purchase a legal exit from further operations. Li Tao accused Zhu Ying of leading everyone else toward death. The commander replied that every officer could choose after fulfilling duty. Wei Quan immediately declared he would remain for the main attack. Lu Hua followed. Then Zhang Wu pledged himself without hesitation. Only Li Tao chose departure after completing the diversion. Zhu Ying accepted that decision without insult or public punishment. Different men face danger differently, and unwilling officers weaken difficult missions. Still, he warned that poor timing or a half-hearted attack meant military consequences. Li Tao swallowed, nodded, and led 1,000 riders toward the south. Li Tao left the command circle carrying equal amounts of relief and resentment. The legal exit saved his life, but everyone had witnessed his choice. Wei Quan, Lu Hua, and Zhang Wu would continue beside Zhu Ying. Their future merit might make Li Tao's caution look permanently shameful. He therefore began constructing excuses before mounting his horse. Perhaps the commander had forced an impossible plan upon responsible officers. Perhaps survival required someone practical enough to reject youthful madness. Perhaps future reports could describe withdrawal as preserving military strength. These thoughts protected pride better than they protected comrades. Li Tao still intended to complete the diversion because disobedience meant execution. He planned the smallest attack capable of satisfying the written orders. His 1,000 riders would approach, shoot, light several fires, then leave. He would avoid close combat and refuse any pursuit beyond safety. Vice commanders beneath him noticed the lack of enthusiasm immediately. One asked whether they should remain after the diversion if Zhu Ying needed support. Li Tao answered that dead heroes received no promotions. The officer looked away convinced, but bound by command hierarchy. Zhu Ying watched the southern column disappear beyond low hills. He did not hate Li Tao for fearing an extreme mission. Fear was natural, and forcing unwilling men into subtle operations invited failure. What concerned him was Li Tao's instinct to rewrite responsibility. Afterward, the man's eyes already searched for future blame rather than present solutions. Zhu Ying stored that observation without starting a needless confrontation. If Li Tao fulfilled timing, the plan could succeed despite his character. If he failed deliberately, military law provided clear answers. Zhang Wu asked whether trusting the diversion to him was wise. Zhu Ying replied that predictable selfishness could still become useful. Li Tao wanted freedom, making the promised exit stronger than loyalty. He would attack because attacking brought exactly what he desired. That incentive made him reliable for one specific hour. Wei Quan studied the map and admitted the logic reluctantly. Command often depended less upon virtue than correctly aligned interest. Zhu Ying's modern understanding of incentives impressed the older officer. The teenager seemed capable of reading people as carefully as terrain. Lu Hua asked how they would synchronize without visible signals. Distance and darkness prevented drums, flags, or direct messengers between forces. Zhu Ying selected a precise hour based on moon position and travel pace. Li Tao would attack when the moon cleared one particular ridge. The southern camp's alarm should travel toward headquarters within minutes. Zhu Ying's northern force would begin its strike slightly earlier. This sequence ensured Anu heard north first, then south immediately afterward. The second report would confirm his likely belief that north was distraction. If Li Tao attacked too early, Anu might react before northern penetration. If too late, reinforcements could already reach Zhu Ying. The timing margin measured only several hundred heartbeats. Zhang Wu repeated the schedule until every senior officer remembered it. Messengers carried synchronized instructions down to 100-man commanders. No ordinary rider learned the full plan, limiting information if captured. Soldiers knew only their route, formation, and immediate orders. Zhu Ying then inspected the 4,000 horses selected for the raid. Animals with injuries, weak breathing, or damaged shoes were replaced. Reserve mounts remained limited, so each chosen horse needed endurance. His mastery identified subtle problems stable hands had overlooked. One mare favored a rear leg despite showing no visible wound. Another gelding breathed poorly in after only brief physical exertion. Zhu Ying reassigned both animals before the dangerous night march. The stable master stared, surprised that a new cavalry commander noticed. Rather than explain miraculous knowledge, Zhu Ying credited careful observation. He checked saddle straps and ordered every unnecessary decoration removed. Loose metal could create sound across silent grassland. Heavy baggage would slow the charge and trap riders during escape. Each man carried only weapons, water, dried rations, and fire bundles. Spare arrows were distributed evenly instead of concentrated in supply carts. If one rider fell, nearby soldiers could recover useful ammunition. Medical cloth and basic medicine went to every 100-man unit. No wagon would follow because wheels advertised movement and limited routes. The force had to become lighter than any ordinary campaign column. Zhu Ying ordered dark cloth wrapped around reflective armor pieces. Helmets remained secured, but banners stayed furled until attack began. Even horsetack received cloth where buckles might strike loudly. The preparations looked excessive to officers accustomed to visible armies. Then Wei Quan imagined 4,000 saddles clicking together at night. He immediately ordered stricter silence across his own company. Lula gathered the 50 personal guards and explained their role. They would not surround Zhu Ying so tightly that he lost movement. Instead, groups covered rear, sides, communication, and replacement horses. Half carried bows, while others favored long sabers and spears. Each guard received a second fire bundle for emergency signaling. Lula warned that protecting command meant preserving the whole force. Dying dramatically beside Zhu Ying would help absolutely nobody. The guards laughed, then checked equipment again with serious attention. Zhu Ying privately appreciated Lula's practical command style. He tested the treasure-carved bow beneath a thick cover. The string remained smooth despite tremendous draw pressure. Several arrows moved from ordinary quivers into system storage. That allowed rapid access if visible supplies disappeared during fighting. The fine steel saber waited beside the healing pill and tiger roar technique. Diarrhea powder remained stored because no useful water source had appeared. Zhu Ying still found the reward ridiculous enough to improve his mood. Zhang Wu approached carrying a final scout summary. The Blue Banner population approached 30,000, including families and workers. Several thousand warriors guarded the 4 satellite camps. Anu could gather far more from surrounding settlements after receiving warning. Northern Yuan troops might arrive within days rather than weeks. Tonight, therefore, offered the last moment before numbers became impossible. The central headquarters held grain, weapons, horses, and communication riders. Destroying those resources would delay regional mobilization beyond immediate casualties. Zhu Ying adjusted every torch team's target priorities accordingly. Supply tents, armories, stables, and signal towers came before ordinary dwellings. Fire teams received sketches based on scout descriptions. They would ignite selected targets while moving, never dismounting unless necessary. Killing mattered, but infrastructure damage served the wider campaign better. This distinction showed Zhu Ying thinking as commander rather than system hunter. Personal attributes would grow anyway inside such a large attack. He did not need every soldier chasing individual ears for merit. Stopping to collect proof could destroy the entire formation. Zhu Ying issued a special rule suspending personal trophy gathering during penetration. Military clerks would estimate unit achievement through objectives and observed casualties. Anyone dismounting for ears without order would face punishment. Several veterans disliked abandoning visible proof of promotion. Zhang Wu supported the command, explaining survival came before accounting. Zhu Ying promised to record every unit participating in the breakthrough. Shared merit would be documented from commanders down to individual riders. That assurance restored enthusiasm without encouraging dangerous delay. He also prohibited private looting from tents and supply stores. Gold, jewelry, and captured goods weighed horses and scattered attention. The mission sought destruction, not a traveling merchant caravan. Officially, recovered intelligence could be taken only by assigned teams. Everything else would either burn completely or remain abandoned behind. Wei Quan noted how easily greed could dissolve even elite cavalry. Zhu Ying remembered his own 100 stolen taels and appreciated the irony. Invisible storage had never slowed his unit or exposed anyone. Ordinary soldiers lacked that deeply unfair storage convenience. He gave orders based on their limitations rather than his secret exceptions. What none of them knew was Anu had completed his own preparations. He knew Ming cavalry operated somewhere south, but not exact numbers. Scouts reported roughly 5,000 riders entering the northern steppe. Anu considered them too few for a serious assault. 30,000 gathered warriors and incoming reinforcements protected the settlement. The Ming force probably intended harassment before retreating home. He concentrated defenses south because geography made every other direction absurd. East and west camps held mobile reserves for mutual support. North received minimal strength because it faced friendly territory. Anu believed this arrangement balanced caution and efficiency perfectly. His officers agreed, especially those assigned comfortable northern positions. Several joked that Ming riders would circle outside arrow range for days. Others expected them to burn grass and claim imaginary victory. Nobody considered a full night penetration through the heartland. That option looked suicidal unless attackers possessed speed, surprise, and abnormal strength. Zhu Ying's force secretly possessed all three necessary advantages. Anu ordered larger celebrations cancelled, but allowed officers normal evening rest. His own private tent remained, guarded by trusted warriors. Messengers kept fresh horses ready in case the southern alarm sounded. No similar preparation faced north because leadership assumptions shaped resources. The defensive network appeared strong precisely where Zhu Ying needed it strongest. A well-designed formation could become a trap when fed false information. The 4 satellite camps depended upon rapid mutual reinforcement. Zhu Ying planned to manipulate that strength until it emptied the target. Back among Ming riders, the final meal contained dried meat and hard bread. Soldiers ate quietly while officers walked between small groups. Nobody lit open fires, leaving camp hidden beneath the moonless sky. Rumors circulated despite limited knowledge of the complete plan. Some believed they would raid a small northern outpost. Others expected simple reconnaissance followed by an immediate safe retreat. A few guessed they were circling behind the main settlement. Those men sounded nervous enough that companions stopped asking questions. Zhu Ying moved through each company, checking faces and speaking briefly. He reminded them that speed would protect better than heavy armor. No one should stop, turn, or chase without direct command. Every rider must trust the man ahead and protect the man beside him. The authority seal amplified his words into unusually steady confidence. Men finished eating and rose without the usual pre-battle hesitation. Horses were watered one final time before saddles tightened. Medical officers checked bandages, straps, and emergency supplies. Scouts departed first in pairs, separated by wide distances. If one pair disappeared later, riders would choose another route. Rear messengers prepared pigeons for reports after the operation. Zhu Ying wrote a short preliminary note explaining the intended maneuver. Wei Quan and the attached inspector witnessed and sealed it. That document protected the force if Li Tao later misrepresented orders. Zhu Ying had learned that battlefields required paper shields beside iron ones. The sealed copy remained with a trusted messenger outside the attack column. Another copy entered system storage where fire could not destroy it. Zhang Wu saw the precaution and nodded approvingly. A young commander who planned for betrayal looked less young every day. Lu Hua reported that every company stood ready. 4,000 riders waited in deep ranks without raised banners. Zhu Ying mounted smoothly, causing cavalry veterans to exchange impressed glances. His horsemanship looked natural enough to suggest a lifetime of practice. Lula positioned guards while Wei Quan took the second command group. Zhang Wu and Lu Hua controlled center and rear sections. Hand signals passed backward, confirming every unit prepared. Zhu Ying looked south where Li Tao's column had vanished. The man had one opportunity to perform exactly as ordered. Then Zhu Ying turned north toward darkness and the enemy's unguarded confidence. He raised 2 fingers, signaling scouts to begin the silent advance. 4,000 horses stepped forward almost together, without drums or shouted commands. The most dangerous operation of Zhu Ying's life had officially begun. Far south, Li Tao watched the agreed moon position with growing dread. His officers arranged torch bundles and arrows for the diversion. Several still hoped they would rejoin Zhu Ying after completing the attack. Li Tao refused, claiming orders explicitly permitted immediate withdrawal. He emphasized that survival preserved strength for future imperial campaigns. The argument sounded reasonable until someone remembered 4,000 comrades remaining behind. Nobody challenged him openly, but respect drained from several expressions. Li Tao noticed and grew more determined to justify himself later. A successful report could transform caution into responsible command on paper. He rehearsed phrases about unavoidable danger and protecting soldiers from reckless leadership. Meanwhile, Zhu Ying relied only upon the promised hour, not Li Tao's courage. That careful distinction would decide whether the entire deception worked. Zhu Ying took 4,000 northward beneath a moonless sky. Crickets, distant wolves, and leather equipment created the only sounds. The riders followed strict spacing to prevent collisions in darkness. No torches burned, leaving the column almost invisible across open steppe. Scouts moved far ahead, marking safe paths with subtle signs. Each rider carried reserve arrows, water, dried food, and fire bundles. Zhu Ying explained the final maneuver only to senior commanders. They would strike the northern satellite camp, then continue through the settlement. Stopping to loot or hold ground would destroy their speed advantage. The entire attack would become one continuous cavalry penetration. After entering, soldiers would ignite tents and supply structures. They would ride out the opposite side before central forces organized. The objective was devastation, confusion, and survival rather than occupation. Zhang Wu finally understood why the force needed no siege equipment. Lu Hua questioned whether the northern defenses might still resist. Zhu Ying answered that surprise and momentum would replace overwhelming numbers. His authority seal secretly supplied the remaining difference. Before midnight, scouts reported the northern camp less than several miles away. Low fires and sleeping tents glimmered beyond a simple wooden barrier. Watchtowers faced outward, but their sentries expected danger from the south. Heavy patrols had already shifted toward the front-facing camp. Zhu Ying spread 4,000 cavalry into a broad, silent formation. Lula and 50 guards took positions close behind him. 100-man officers repeated orders through hand signals rather than voices. Every rider understood they would charge without stopping once discovered. Failure to maintain momentum could trap the entire column inside. The northern watchtowers held several board sentries, talking quietly. One complained that the Ming army made sleep impossible. Another assured him every attack would hit the southern defenses. Going around through Jurchen territory seemed too insane to imagine. Zhu Ying raised the graded bow and prepared divine arrow barrage. 3 arrows left nearly together, each driven by 600 strength. 3 sentries collapsed before any could shout or strike a bell. Additional shafts silenced the remaining towers within moments. System notices granted strength, speed, endurance, and another chest milestone. The gate remained closed, but no organized defenders had awakened. 4,000 cavalry waited 200 paces away in perfect darkness. Zhu Ying lowered the bow and drew his fine steel saber. One raised hand traveled backward through every command signal. The broad formation tightened in 2 columns designed for the entrance. Horses felt riders leaning forward and began breathing harder. Zhu Ying pointed toward the gate and ordered the charge. Thousands of hooves struck together, transforming silence into approaching thunder. Sleeping jerkins woke to shaking earth and distant screams. A gate guard reached the alarm drum several seconds too late. Zhu Ying released another arrow and removed him from the platform. The wooden barrier rushed closer beneath the accelerating formation. Lu Hua expected axes or a halted assault against the gate. Zhu Ying instead stored his bow and lowered one armored shoulder. With nearly 600 strength, timber seemed less impressive than before. His horse veered aside at the final instant through perfect control. Zhu Ying leaped from the saddle and struck the reinforced gates. Mountain-crushing fist multiplied power through his arm into the crossbeam. Wood exploded inward, showering defenders with fragments and disbelief. He landed, recovered the horse, and returned to the saddle immediately. The cavalry poured through the opening before enemies understood the breach. Zhu Ying became the point of the advancing column. Wild Dance Saber turned each movement into aggressive forward destruction. The first defenders arrived half-dressed, with weapons barely secured. They fell before forming a line or warning the central settlement. Every kill raised Zhu Ying's power, while his pace remained unchanged. His soldiers followed through the corridor of enemies he created. The authority seal made riders stronger, braver, and unusually tireless. They moved like veterans, serving together for years rather than days. Torch teams ignited tents, grain stores, animal pens, and defensive towers. Fire spread quickly across dry roofs beneath strong frontier wind. The sleeping camp transformed into orange confusion within minutes. Messengers raced toward the Blue Banner headquarters carrying contradictory reports. And suddenly, Anu received news that Ming cavalry had struck from the north. He had placed strongest forces south, because every sensible enemy came there. The northern strike therefore looked like an obvious diversion. Anu prepared to send several thousand riders north regardless. Then Li Tao launched his scheduled attack against the southern camp. Arrows, torches, drums, and cavalry movement made the threat appear substantial. A second messenger arrived before Anu completed his first order. North and south were suddenly under attack at the same time. The Jurchen general now faced precisely the confusion Zhu Ying designed. If he split troops, both responses might become too weak. If he chose incorrectly, the real attack could destroy something vital. Anu decided the northern assault must be a distracting sacrifice. No Ming commander would place the main force deeper inside Jurchen territory. He cancelled northern reinforcements and rushed additional soldiers south. Li Tao's cautious diversion had accidentally become perfectly convincing. At the north camp, defenders waited for reinforcements that never arrived. Zhu Ying saw the road toward the central settlement opening ahead. He ordered every rider to maintain speed and keep moving forward. No soldier could stop for valuables, captives, trophies, or personal grudges. The raid would succeed only if 4,000 men behaved like one spear. Behind them, the northern camp burned brighter across the night. Ahead, the Blue Banner settlement still misunderstood where death was coming. Zhu Ying raised his saber and drove deeper toward the sleeping heartland. The enemy commander had outsmarted himself exactly as Zhu Ying intended. The northern camp collapsed behind Zhu Ying as his cavalry reached broader roads. Flames illuminated panicked families, loose animals, and soldiers running without formation. Zhu Ying ordered torch teams outward while the main column remained tightly focused. The force would cut straight through, burn strategic structures, and exit quickly. Jurchen defenders tried building a shield line across the road. Divine arrow barrage shattered the formation before cavalry reached striking distance. Multiple shafts left each draw, finding exposed throats and unarmored faces. The graded bow drove arrows through leather armor, and sometimes the men behind. Zhu Ying returned it to storage and raised the steel saber. His horse accelerated beneath practiced knees, while wild dance saber began. The first enemy lost his weapon, arm, and confidence within one movement. A second tried thrusting a spear and received a blade across the neck. Every notification strengthened Zhu Ying during the continuing charge. Strength rose, then speed, constitution, endurance, spirit, and lifespan. The soldiers behind him saw only a commander who never slowed. They did not know. Every kill refreshed the imbalance against his opponents. At the beginning, strong defenders might barely block one attack. Minutes later, the same effort could not delay his weapon at all. The cavalry column became a steel river following the path he opened. Riders struck outward at enemies approaching from alleys and burning tents. No one broke formation because officers repeated the command continuously. Keep moving, keep burning, and never chase targets away from the column. Inside his headquarters, General Anu received increasingly disastrous messages. The northern camp had been breached, yet southern fighting still continued. He believed the south remained the true attack and held reserves there. That decision left Zhu Ying's route almost completely unprotected. By the time Anu recognized the error, central structures were already burning. Another messenger claimed the northern force moved as one impossible column. Nobody could count them accurately, because darkness magnified every shadow. Reports suggested a monstrous commander broke defenses before soldiers arrived. Anu finally ordered northern pursuit, but available units stood too far away. Zhu Ying's riders reached the main stores and set everything alight. Grain, weapon tents, saddles, arrows, and winter supplies fed enormous flames. Destroying supplies would hurt more than killing scattered warriors. Jurchen plans against Danning now faced hunger, confusion, and lost equipment. The cavalry entered residential sections where resistance became desperate and disorganized. Armed men rushed from tents, sometimes without helmets or complete clothing. Zhu Ying treated every weapon raised toward his riders as immediate permission. One cut ended most encounters before a second movement became necessary. His authority seal kept horses and riders performing far beyond normal endurance. Men who had ridden all night still attacked with fresh aggression. They believed adrenaline, leadership, and victory carried them forward. The invisible truth was a 60% enhancement affecting the entire force. Zhu Ying's own endurance made fatigue feel like a distant theoretical concept. He could continue fighting long after ordinary soldiers collapsed. A sudden milestone notification announced all major attributes crossing 700. Warm energy restored his body while the system awarded another chest. The raid became easier precisely when it should have grown exhausting. Zhu Ying ordered every remaining torch thrown into useful structures. The night sky turned orange above a settlement of nearly 30,000. Smoke rolled over roads as civilians fled away from advancing cavalry. Defenders tried attacking from rooftops until arrows swept them down. Others blocked exits with carts, animals, and overturned supply wagons. Mountain-crushing fist cleared one obstruction with an explosive single blow. Soldiers behind Zhu Ying shouted when broken timber scattered across the road. The column maintained momentum and reached the far side of the settlement. One final jerkin formation gathered near the northern exit. Several hundred warriors stood shoulder to shoulder beneath hastily raised flags. Zhu Ying saw their courage, then saw an excellent concentration of targets. He retrieved the graded bow without anyone noticing its strange appearance. Divine Arrow Barrage released repeated volleys into the crowded front ranks. Each shaft carried enough power to penetrate armor and continue deeper. The defensive line weakened before Ming cavalry reached it. Zhu Ying stored the bow, lowered his saber, and struck the center. 4,000 riders followed, widening the opening with overwhelming force. Jerkin ranks split, stumbled, and disappeared beneath hooves. Within moments, the Ming force burst through into open northern steppe. Behind them, the settlement burned from one end toward the other. Ahead waited empty grassland and the possibility of immediate pursuit. Zhu Ying rode several miles before raising one hand for a halt. Blood-covered cavalry slowed into formation beneath the first gray light. Armor, weapons, and horses carried evidence of the violent passage. Yet no rider looked broken, frightened, or ready to collapse. Zhu Ying ordered commanders to count every man immediately. Reports returned company by company with wounded numbers and astonishing results. All 4,000 riders remained alive after charging through the settlement. Several hundred carried wounds, but none had died during the breakthrough. The authority seal had turned impossible luck into a consistent battlefield pattern. Zhu Ying raised his saber and praised every soldier as a Ming hero. 4,000 voices answered with loyalty that frightened nearby birds from grass. Their devotion came from seeing him lead every charge personally. Money could purchase obedience, but shared danger created something much stronger. Zhang Wu took 100 riders for rotating rearguard duty. Other soldiers dismounted, treated wounds, watered horses, and ate dried rations. 90 minutes of rest would prepare them for another rapid movement. Zhu Ying alone remained energetic enough to patrol the entire perimeter. Before doing so, he opened the hidden panel and stared twice. Strength had climbed close to 1,000 points. Speed approached 900, while Constitution and Endurance passed 700. Spirit also exceeded 700 after one night of continuous combat. His lifespan now contained more than 6 additional years. Storage space expanded again, reaching 7 convenient cubic meters. One punch could possibly shatter a city gate into firewood. His speed made normal attacks appear almost leisurely by comparison. Arrows struggled to penetrate skin that healed visible wounds within minutes. Armor had become camouflage, preventing soldiers from noticing. He barely needed protection. 2 milestone chests waited from crossing 600 and 700 attributes. The first contained Tiger Roar, yellow-grade sonic combat technique. It could damage morale and bodies through focused sound. Full power required internal energy. Zhu Ying had not yet awakened. Even incomplete use promised terrifying effects through raw physical strength. The technique also confirmed true internal force might eventually become possible. Zhu Ying could become the only cultivator inside a non-cultivation world. The second chest contained 10 enormous bags of violent diarrhea powder. He stared at the reward, briefly questioning whether the system respected him. Then strategic possibilities appeared with uncomfortable and hilarious clarity. Poisoning an enemy water source could stop pursuit without direct battle. Jerkins might fight Ming cavalry and their own intestines simultaneously. Sun Tzu had never recorded this method, which felt like missed scholarship. Zhu Ying stored the powder and summoned Wei Quan with the report. He wrote that the settlement was destroyed and enemy casualties exceeded 10,000. All 4,000 attacking soldiers survived, despite widespread minor wounds. The message promised to hold Jurchen forces north and away from Danning. A military inspector co-signed the numbers, making fabrication a suicidal gamble. Wei Quan tied the report to a train pigeon and released it south. Zhu Ying then ordered everyone to rest while he personally kept watch. Behind him, the burning settlement glowed beneath the brightening sky. Somewhere southward, Li Tao was already riding back toward Danning. He had completed the diversion, fired arrows, then withdrawn exactly as promised. Unfortunately, he also began writing his own version of events. That report described Zhu Ying as reckless, aggressive, and impossible to restrain. Li Tao claimed he withdrew only to preserve soldiers from senseless destruction. He omitted the agreed plan, the legal exit, and his commander's conditions. If Zhu Ying died, the report would protect Li Tao from blame. If Zhu Ying survived, Li Tao hoped distance would blur responsibility. The strategy was cowardly, dishonest, and temporarily effective. At Danning City, Prefect Bu and welcomed the arriving Imperial High Command. Feng Sheng, Duke of Song, entered with elite guards and legendary generals. He had fought since the dynasty's founding and commanded 200,000 troops. Fu Yaod, Lan Yu, and other celebrated officers traveled beside him. These men had expelled Mongol armies and helped build Ming power. Buin immediately briefed them on northern Yuan movements and frontier defenses. Naga Chu had attacked a border city, but Ming defenders still held. One Danning force prepared eastern raids, while another contained the Jurchens north. Feng Sheng asked specifically about Zhu Ying, whose report he remembered. Buin explained that the teenage commander designed the divided strategy. He also revealed Zhu Ying now led 5,000 cavalry deep in enemy territory. Feng Sheng approved the courage until Li Tao's message arrived. The false report described a night attack against an enormous fortified settlement. It claimed Zhu Ying ignored caution and led 4,000 riders toward disaster. Feng Sheng frowned because reckless bravery often wasted excellent young warriors. He would have preferred harassment, movement, and delay, rather than direct assault. Buin imagined 4,000 soldiers surrounded and slaughtered, far from support. Both men silently prepared for terrible news and painful military accounting. Feng Sheng called Zhu Ying courageous, but too immature for independent command. His conclusion made sense because Li Tao's report carefully excluded the actual plan. They ordered messengers north, hoping to command retreat before everything collapsed. That was when an aide burst inside carrying an urgent pigeon from Zhu Ying himself. The room changed immediately because a message meant the boy remained alive. Buin accepted the paper, then respectfully handed it to Feng Sheng. The Duke opened it, expecting a request for rescue or a final farewell. Instead, the first line reported complete and overwhelming success. The second described more than 10,000 enemy casualties. The third recorded 0 Ming deaths among 4,000 attacking cavalry. Feng Sheng's disappointed expression transformed into open delight. He reread the document, checked the inspector's seal, and began laughing. The greatest living Ming commander admitted he had underestimated Zhu Ying. Senior generals gathered closer, demanding to hear the report aloud. A guard captain announced the enemy settlement had been overrun from the north. Li Tao's southern feint drew reserves away at the decisive moment. Zhu Ying led 4,000 riders straight through the undefended heart. They burned supplies, destroyed defenses, and exited without losing one soldier. Silence struck the room before every veteran began speaking at once. Even losing 1,000 men could have accompanied such an impressive raid. 0 deaths made the performance difficult to believe despite official verification. Feng Sheng emphasized that military inspectors signed reports under penalty of death. The victory therefore represented real command ability, not lucky storytelling. 4,000 enhanced cavalry had performed like 10,000 elite riders. Nobody knew about the authority seal, so they credited leadership and tactics. Feng Sheng asked a senior marquis to explain Zhu Ying's method. The officer described how expected attack directions shaped Jurchen deployment. South faced Ming territory, so defenders concentrated their strength there. North faced safe heartland and therefore received minimal attention. Zhu Ying attacked north first, making Anu suspect deliberate distraction. Li Tao then struck south, confirming the general's mistaken assumption. Anu moved additional troops south and created his own northern weakness. Zhu Ying did not merely discover an opening, he manufactured one. Feng Sheng praised the plan as bold, disciplined, and psychologically precise. Buan glowed because the young commander's success reflected upon his administration. Then Feng Sheng remembered Li Tao's earlier contradictory message. His smile disappeared while the entire room became colder. One report proved victory, timing, and the agreed southern diversion. The other claimed disobedience, recklessness, and an unauthorized retreat. Both could not be truthful, and the inspector's seal settled the issue. Li Tao had abandoned his operational role after minimum effort. Worse, he filed a false report defaming his superior officer. Disobeying command, deserting active operations, and falsifying military documents were capital crimes. Zhu Ying's pigeon had delivered victory and Li Tao's destruction together. Feng Sheng ordered the cowardly officer detained before he could escape. Buan sent guards immediately, suddenly regretting believing the false account. Li Tao had expected a dead teenager, not an authenticated strategic masterpiece. Now, the empire's most famous generals knew exactly what he had done. Far north, Zhu Ying remained unaware his report had reached legendary commanders. He was already planning the next move against pursuing Jurchen cavalry. In Danning, guards were riding toward Li Tao with sealed arrest orders. The officer, who expected a dead teenager, now faced 3 capital charges. His lies collapsed because Zhu Ying documented every order before the raid. The victory protected 4,000 soldiers and exposed one calculated betrayal. The Shen family's discarded pawn now stood among history's greatest Ming commanders. One carrier pigeon transformed Zhu Ying's triumph into Li Tao's certain downfall.